Let me tell you something you already know. The world ain't all sunshine and rainbows. It's a very mean and nasty place, and I don't care how tough you are, it will beat you to your knees and keep you there permanently if you let it. You, me, or nobody is gonna hit as hard as life. But it ain't about how hard you hit. It's about how hard you can get hit and keep moving forward. How much you can take and keep moving forward. That's how winning is done.
When the moon hits your eye like a big pizza pie, that's amore. When the world seems to shine like you've had too much wine, that's amore.
Back and better than ever as we get your Wednesday morning broadcast underway. It is Hump Day, the 8th of September, 2021. Short work week. We've reached the middle of the traditional broadcast week here on the Big Talker, 106.7 FM. Too much dew on the windows this morning to see Battleship North Carolina. But as you tune in through our Facebook feed or by subscribing to our YouTube channel, I pulled up our Surf Checks cam, and it looks like another gorgeous morning across southeastern North Carolina. A little hazy, a little humid, and those temperatures are going to be back rising up into, the low 90s with those heat index values nearing the triple digits once again today. So kind of a soppy, wet, late summer day in the forecast as we get our morning program rocking and rolling here on the most listened to, entertaining, and informative broadcast anywhere across the Cape Fear region. So about an hour ago or so, I had an email pop up in my inbox from, a source within Novant Health and New Hanover Regional Medical Center, and they provide us and have provided us some inside details over the course of the last 6 or 7 months on a twice a month sort of basis as they get the emails from the top brass within our local hospital and Novant Health, of course, which has a footprint not only here in southeastern North Carolina, but all across the state. And we got a COVID update from a source at the hospital, and it looks like after all the news last week about limited capacity within the hospital, of course, we had a call from a doctor who used to host a show here on the Big Talker way back when he was making the plea to get your jab. Well, it looks like after all of that, the storm has been weathered, at least over at New Hanover Regional Medical Center. According to this email, the local hospital has seen a steady decline in the number of COVID patients over the past week or so. A reminder that Novant Health also recently extended its deadline to September 14th of this month for all of its employees statewide to get the jab. Now, they, of course, did that without saying as much, but extending the deadline in all likelihood because they haven't been able to convince, a certain portion of healthcare workers within their system to get the shot. According to the email, 86% of New Hanover Regional Medical Center team members have got one shot of the vaccine. And in maybe another effort to incentivize getting the jab over at the local hospital, Novant Health apparently has also announced that employees will be getting a 2% raise over the next few months after just getting a 3% raise not too long ago. I guess their thinking is that the 10% of employees or so who have yet to line up for the COVID vaccine will change their mind and will stay for the money. Of course, it's kind of been get the jab or lose your job. And that was sort of the email that was sent out, an announcement that was made not too long ago. And then they extended the deadline to get the jab and now announcing a pay raise internally within their hospital network. That said, New Hanover Regional Medical Center has seen a steady decline in the number of COVID patients over the past week or so. Over in Brunswick County, a decline, but they have also seen an influx of non-COVID related patients, included in this internal email that was forwarded over to me about an hour ago as we were getting our show prep done, and I just got off the phone with our good buddy TK Turbo because we had some issues with our antenna in connecting with WWA Wire that I was not aware of. So we got that all hashed out about a half hour ago. Any morning you can start the conversation off with TK Turbo or engineer and programmer. Well, there's a reason why one side of my hair is beginning to turn gray. Yeah, I'll never lose this wop mop, but it is starting to get a little salt and pepper. Foo, my man Foo over at Tad's Barbershop. I make sure he uses that straight razor to get that little white and gray out of the forefront of my wop mop every time I go get the cut, and my ears lowered over there at the best barbershop in town over on Oleander Drive. So that's where we start this morning with some local news, and that'll continue, kind of a trend here today, because there's a lot going on locally as questions continue to arise stemming from the shooting at New Hanover New Hanover High School last week. And as we kind of process what was discussed and the meeting that was held amongst elected officials and others back on Friday, where it was announced that, well, at the tune of $350 million will be allocated to, quote-unquote, stopping the violence in our community. That's it. Par for the course, no, when it comes to government and the reactionary way in which they address certain issues that pop up in society. School safety is nothing new, by the way, when it comes to violence that we have seen in the schools and shootings at schools. This is nothing new. And as one of the coaches pointed out to me last week, today it happened at New Hanover High School. Could have happened at any other high school in the area. And I responded in a way that probably, ticked him off, in that we have been experiencing an uprise in violence, particularly over the last couple of months, stemming from the double homicide. We had the shooting on Kidder Street that killed multiple people. And it seemed as if through the middle of the summer, coming off every weekend, someone was getting shot and killed within the city of Wilmington. So when it happens in one of the schools, it deserves the attention it has garnered. Now, with that said, school safety should be nothing new in a conversation amongst elected officials and those within the system. A system that has been unwilling to look in the mirror for a long, long time. Not only in regards to safety measures, but also across the board when it comes to just general proficiency amongst our school-age children. And now, after a meeting of the minds back on Friday, they immediately throw $350 million towards this quote-unquote problem. So what's the plan? And I guess that's going to be hashed out, apparently, over the next couple of weeks and months. And by the fall, we should get a better idea on how that $350 million will be used and allocated. Will there be any sorts of strings attached to that? Will there be goals, of course, that we should reach for, and benchmarks that can show us tangible results for just throwing money at a problem? Because we often know the reactionary way of government is to, put money towards something, and at the end of the day, what do we get out of it? What comes of it? But hey, city council members in Wilmington met last night and voted to extend the Black Lives Matter mural for another year at Gervais Park as you roll into the downtown area on 3rd Street. So, we're allocating millions without a document when it comes to how this money will be used or a plan that is put forth, but here's the money. And we'll figure it out from there. And heck, the mural that says Black Lives Do Matter, End Racism Now, is still up, so I guess they're doing their part. Not once, of course, during the discussion yesterday with City Council or during this discussion that was held back on Friday. And in large part, hate to get political and partisan here, but in large part, governing bodies that are made up of a majority of Democrats. Hard-pressed to find a comment in any of these conversations about violence, about, the reasoning behind the Black Lives Do Matter mural. This was highlighting, right, the injustices and the economic and educational gaps in our society. Well, nothing made mention during these conversations, of course, of what's been going on in Raleigh within the state General Assembly by the Republican-led legislature to encourage more educational choice and freedom through things like the Opportunity Scholarship Program. No mention over the past several weeks from those either elected or hired by our government officials. No mention of the Republican-led legislature enacting historical criminal justice reform here in North Carolina. Among some of those measures, Raise the Age Act, the Second Chance Act, the First Step Act, which overturned mandatory minimum sentences, which were imposed by and encouraged by then Senator Roy Cooper before he became Attorney General and then ultimately the governor. So we allocate hundreds of millions of dollars towards, an effort to quote-unquote stop the violence. And now we're going to make a plan. And when it comes to school safety measures, I think this sits right on the lap of our new Hanover County School Board. School safety, nothing new when it comes to general conversations around areas in which our young children spend the most amount of time in their young lives in these facilities and buildings, which should be of the utmost importance to those elected officials that oversee our school districts, not only here, but all across the country. Reactionary is pretty much the key word here when it comes to the response that we see by those in elected positions after a scary situation plays out the way it did 2 Mondays back at New Hanover High School. And after remaining silent in the immediate aftermath of the double homicide at his son's house, there's been a lot of talk these days around George Taylor, the founder of True Colors Brewing, and their efforts to try and curb the street violence that we've seen all across the country and in our city as well. In fact, George has been tuned in to our program, or who has people that tune into our show day by day, and he caught wind a few weeks back of some of the things that we were sharing with you as far as our opinions on his business and the gang life that is leading to much of the violence within the city. And in fact, George reached out to me last week, and I was hesitant to meet with him at True Colors Brewing for reasons that you could probably figure out yourself. But we actually met here at the office, and that was a week or two ago. And I wanted to know more about him and his statement and mission over at True Colors. And I still, frankly, after meeting with him for over an hour, still have many uncertainties about his approach. But after the county commissioners, the sheriff, the DA, the school board, a judge, among others, after they met last Friday, and the county immediately signed up to allocating $350 million towards, making a dent in the rise in gun violence here locally, George actually penned an open letter to our elected officials, and it's in the latest edition of the Wilmington Business Journal. And frankly, I agree with some of the things he had to say. And during our conversation not too long ago, he made me think a few times during our discussion about his approach. And it's not that I'm completely sold at all on everything he had to say, because ultimately, as a businessman, he is a pitch man when it comes to selling his product and brand. And I want to give you, I took some 2 pages of notes while I was talking with him a week or so ago during our discussion. And I'd rather present them to you without my opinion to get your thoughts on the matter, rather than give you mine prior to you sharing your opinions. And we're going to try and lay out piece by piece, step by step, the notes that I took during our conversation. And I want to do that over the next few days so you can get a more inside look at what he believes, because it is, very unique and kind of eye-opening, frankly, when it comes to some of the stories that he's told me, some of the connections that he's made within the gang culture, not only here in North Carolina, but all across the country in some of our nation's biggest cities. And he has, again, an open letter that was published by the Wilmington Business Journal calling into question all of this money that is being allocated towards, quote-unquote, stopping the violence here in our city and area at the tune of $350 million. And that's where I think he and I align when it comes to just throwing money at a problem rather than looking at maybe, a different approach, or not only that a different approach maybe would work, but other ideas and solutions rather than the typical way of life when it comes to government, which is to just try and throw money at a problem, see what sticks, and hope it goes away. We're 22 minutes past the hour here on the Big Talker FM. State Treasurer Dale Folwell, he had an adjustment he had to make in his schedule this morning, so instead of his typical spot just after 8 o'clock, twice a month on Wednesdays, Treasurer Folwell going to join us here in about 15 minutes. I want to get the Treasurer's thoughts on the pandemic unemployment benefits that expired back on Monday here in North Carolina and a number of other states across the U.S. At the time of the expiration of those extra federal benefits that have coincided with the state for the better part of 18 months, despite the fact there are help wanted signs on nearly every storefront in the state and the country, more than 100,000 North Carolinians were receiving those extra benefits as of last week. And again, on Monday, September 4th, Labor Day, the conclusion of the nearly 18-month period of increased benefits came to an end here in North Carolina. Other states, of course, opted out much, much earlier, and as a result, we've seen their unemployment rate drop month after month as ours has remained pretty much stagnant during that time. And there continues, of course, as we mentioned, to be staff and worker shortages across all industries in the state. How do we get people back to work? We'll see if State Treasurer Dale Folwell has the answer when he joins us here now in about 10 minutes. We're 24 minutes past the hour. If you'd like to call in, our number is 910-299-7535. Welcome on in to the Wednesday edition of the program. Great to be with you as we get the show underway here on the Big Talker 106.7 FM.
The pandemics reminded us we live in a sea of airborne germs that can assault us with every breath. Your nose is the body's first line of defense by helping filter out allergens, bacteria, and viruses before they reach your lungs. But like any air filter, the more clogged up it gets, the less it works. So how do you clean your nose? I'm Martin Hoke, and I didn't invent nasal irrigation. The neti pot's been around thousands of years. But I did invent Navage to make cleaning your nose easy. Navage uses powered suction to flush out mucus and germs that cause congestion, or worse, can make you sick. Over 2 million people use Navage to breathe better, sleep deeper, snore less, and feel healthier without drugs. Navage has over 70,000 online reviews averaging 4.7 stars because it works and it's easy to use. Go to Navage.com or find Navage at Walgreens, CVS, Rite Aid, Bed Bath, and Target. Now available with eucalyptus for a spa-like experience. Navage. Navage. Clean nose, healthy life.
Folks, we all know ongoing road construction and traffic can weigh heavy on your vehicle. Since 2006, O'Leary's Automotive Repair has provided comprehensive repair services at affordable prices to get you back on the road in no time. Their ASE certified technicians will help you find a cost-effective repair and maintenance alternatives. O'Leary's has multiple locations in the area in Hampstead, Leland, the Myrtle Grove area, Ogden, and Wrightsboro. O'Leary's Automotive Repair, a trusted, locally owned business since 2006.
Hi, this is Justin Humphreys from the Humphreys Law Firm on Eastwood Road. The Humphreys Law Firm is located in Lumina Station, Wilmington, North Carolina, practices civil litigation, intellectual property, commercial, and residential real estate. Please give us a call at 910-332-0721 or visit us on our website, which is www.humphreysfirm.law. You can also listen to me every Thursday from 6 to 7 p.m. on the Big Talker 106.7 FM.
I'm Rob Renz, Marine Corps veteran, entrepreneur, and local business owner. Join me and my buddies on Monday from 6 to 7 for Signal Fire Radio, where we discuss how to successfully transition from the military and become a signal fire in your community. That's Signal Fire Radio, Mondays from 6 to 7 p.m. on 106.7 The Big Talk.
Take it back, take it back, yeah, take it back, take it back. Well, I've been told by some people, and they all said to take it back.
All right, as we head to the bottom of the hour news break, State Treasurer Dale Folwell is scheduled to call in just after the timeout. It looked like a great crowd up in Pender County last night for their annual Lincoln Reagan dinner. A packed house, as I saw some photos pop up through my social media feed this morning. In fact, had a meeting late yesterday afternoon with a few folks who were headed that way. Speaking of raising money and Republican politics, also got something in my inbox from yesterday announcing a fundraising luncheon that will be held in the area next week for Representative Ted Budd. Of course, the congressman from the Winston-Salem, Greensboro area has announced his intentions to seek the GOP nomination for the U.S. Senate race in the midterms of November of 2022. Congressman Budd got the surprise endorsement from President Trump back in the summer at the NCGOP convention in Greenville. He's joined the program on a few occasions. In fact, yesterday we had one of his counterparts in the GOP primary when Representative Mark Walker joined us. We have spoken once with former Governor Pat McCrory, and we'll continue to do our best, of course, to bring you those conversations with the candidates seeking your vote from U.S. Senate all the way down to school board here at the local level. Speaking of the schools, as you probably heard, New Hanover High School going to implement a clear bag policy beginning about a month from now, in response to the shooting that took place at their school last week. New Hanover High School moving forward with implementing what they consider a safety and security measure. One of them includes the use of clear or see-through book bags. By October 11th, students will be required to use a clear or see-through book bag if they are using a bag to carry items on school grounds. Now, they say they will support all students that need assistance with acquiring a clear book bag. Now, as far as what this does and why, in fact, they're moving forward with a clear bag policy, any, of course, data or statistics to back up that clear bags as you walk into the schools, prevent violence, I'm not really sure, because during the meeting last week of those in charge, county commissioners, law enforcement officials, school board members, Judge Corpening made mention that because there's been a lot of talk of why there were no metal detectors and why there are no metal detectors at these high schools, or at least at New Hanover. And Judge Corpening highlighted the fact that it was in his belief that metal detectors don't work and that, well, this shooting was going to take place somewhere in some way, shape, or form if it had not happened in the catwalk the way it did 2 Mondays back. Now, the judge did not provide any sort of tangible evidence to conclude that metal detectors don't work, but I guess we have to take his word. He's the judge, and we move forward. And somehow, some way, implementing a clear bag policy is going to help solve some of the problems that we have when it comes to violence within the schools. So these are the decisions being made by administrators within New Hanover High School. Metal detectors, don't seem to work, apparently, according to the judge. There was nothing of any sort of substance that backed up his thought. It was just a comment he made that garnered some attention last week because there has been a lot of talk from those on social and everywhere else that, in fact, people questioning why these sorts of things were not implemented to begin with. The district court judge said he believes the shooting would have occurred regardless of whether students were scanned, though it may have changed the location of the incident. So instead of happening in the catwalk, it could have happened, outside of the street. Well, school officials not necessarily responsible for things that happen outside in the street. They are, in fact, in charge of the safety security of our school children when they are in the schoolhouse. He said research suggests metal detectors make kids feel as if they are imprisoned and do little to deter violence. That was the statement made in the news report that I'm reading here. I believe it was from WECT. Though, of course, nothing following that up with any sort of studies or research to actually indicate that metal detectors make kids feel safe, make kids feel as if they are imprisoned, and do little to deter violence. But I guess we should just take him for his word. 910-299-7535. Before we go to break, we'll take a call. Good morning, caller. I hope you're off to a great start this morning.
I am, but you're going to make it better because I had to be in front of Judge Corpany on a civil matter about 8 years ago. I had all the evidence. I had everything right there in front and totally got thrown under the bus. So no doubt in my mind, that guy is an idiot. And it doesn't matter if you got. So that feels better now. I won't say that for 8 years, but seriously, it was, I just shook my head. I went, I've heard such great things about this guy. And it was totally ridiculous. And so, yeah, he don't need evidence.
And hey, with that said, and I've heard many great things about him in trying to, for adults who get charged with crime or come in front of the bench. And, he works to, of course, keep relationships intact with young people and maybe their fathers that get in some sort of trouble and trying to, keep the unit together, even though, the adult male may be having to go through the judicial and criminal justice system. I've heard a lot of great things about him as well. In fact, I know that local show hosts have talked with him on our program before, particularly related to, drug cases and, drug rehabilitation. So, yeah, there's a lot of good things that people say about him and many others within our community. But, some of these ideas, they don't have much substance to back them up, yet common sense from yourself and many others would tell you that, well, some of these things, particularly related to security measures across our schools, have been implemented for a long, long time all across the nation. Why are we hesitant to, to move forward with these sorts of things here locally? And that's
here's the irony. I was going before him with a divorce case, and the only reason I went there is because my ex did not want me to see my child but 8 days out of the month. Nothing had ever gone between my child. I see her every day, saw her every day, and I went there and I went, hey, this is crazy. Why can't I see her half the time? She's like 15 or 16 years old. And I got 10 days out of the month. And this is supposedly advocate for families. And I went, this is insane. I mean, I'm glad I wasn't there when he rendered that judgment because I'd have probably been in jail because that was crazy. But anyway, that's my 2 cents. I feel better now, man. Thank you.
And I'm glad that you were able to get that off your chest. Like you said, it's been digging at you for years. And finally, an opportune time pops up on the most listened to, entertaining, and informative program. And look at that. I have precedents to back up, some of my thoughts here this morning. Gentleman calls in randomly and says, hey, you're right. He doesn't need evidence to make a ruling, as he did in my case. I presented all the evidence of the case, and I was still baffled by his ruling. Well, he makes this blanket statement the other day, and everyone just nods their head like a bunch of dodo birds, because this is how government works. Let's allocate the money before we develop a plan, and then hope everyone forgets about it and say, look, we're doing something here. $350 million is going towards stopping the violence. And as I mentioned, after the double murder in his son's home, George Taylor, the CEO and the founder of True Colors Brewing, has remained relatively silent until now. And he's starting to make his rounds across multiple media outlets. I know WWAY caught up with him just the other day. And in fact, George came to our office a week and a half or so ago, and we had almost an hour and a half conversation about his view on the violence and the gang culture. And not that I agreed, and I'm still processing it because, frankly, I got so much going on that there was so much substance in the discussion and so many things that didn't necessarily line up with my way of thinking that I took some 2 pages of notes. But he and I are on the same page when it comes to government addressing an issue in our society and this idea that if we throw money at the problem, it'll all go away. And he expressed those thoughts in an open letter that he penned to our elected officials that has been published in the Greater Wilmington Business Journal. And I encourage you to look at it and read it. And maybe we'll read it over the next day or so. And again, not that I'm all on board with his line of thinking and what he's been called to do, interacting with high-level gang members all across the country. But he did pose some questions to me that got me thinking. And that is how the conversation moves forward and the discussion continues. Challenging each other's thoughts, spending time to process it, let it marinate, and then build conclusions and responses that are informed, that have some detail, and what do you know, maybe some substance and some evidence to back up your opinions on the matter. But when it comes to our elected officials, well, let's just throw money at it, and we'll get back to you in a couple of months with a plan. We're 22 minutes in front of the hour. We'll be speaking with State Treasurer Dale Folwell. Treasurer Folwell, just hold the line. We've got a quick news break. We're running a little behind this morning. And we'll speak with the keeper of the public purse here in the state of North Carolina when we get back here on the Big Talker FM.
Hello, I'm Jeff Rivenbark with WWAY News. A powerful earthquake has struck in southern Mexico near the Pacific resort city of Acapulco, causing buildings to rock and sway in Mexico City, hundreds of kilometers away. At least one death has been reported. The U.S. Geological Survey says last night's magnitude 7 quake was centered northeast of Acapulco. The mayor says there are no serious problems, though gas leaks and fallen walls were reported. In Virginia today, crews are set to remove one of the country's largest remaining monuments to the Confederacy, a towering statue of Robert E. Lee in Richmond. The bronze likeness of Lee on a horse will be hoisted off its 40-foot pedestal 131 years after it was erected in the former capital of the Confederacy. While many saw the statue as an offensive tribute to the South's slave-holding past, public officials had long resisted its removal. Back here in the Cape Fear, the city of Northwest is exploring options to maintain its police department rather than turning over law enforcement duties to the Brunswick County Sheriff's Office. There was a heartfelt plea from some of the citizens of Northwest after it was revealed city leaders were considering disbanding the police department and contracting with the Brunswick County Sheriff's Office for law enforcement services. The department currently employs a chief and 2 officers, and the chief is set to retire at the end of the month. Some worry outsourcing to the county could create safety concerns. And more than a week after a shooting at New Hanover High School in which a student was injured, the campus announcing a new security policy. The principal sent out an alert Monday requiring clear backpacks at the school. The requirement goes into effect October 11th. A spokesperson for the district says they're also in the process of developing something for all 45 schools in New Hanover County. For more on these stories, head over to WWAYTV3.com. I'm Jeff Rivenbark. Have a great day.
Happy Wednesday, everybody. I'm WWAY meteorologist Ramel Carpenter with your Storm Track 3 forecast. Well, we are going to see another warm and humid day across the Cape Fear. If you're inland of the coast, we're going to see those highs jump into the upper 80s, perhaps the low 90s in a few neighborhoods. And closer to the coast, we're going to be jumping into the middle 80s for afternoon highs. We do have a high in risk for rip currents today, so stay out of the water today if you're headed out to the beach. And as we head into the afternoon hours, we do have a small chance for an afternoon shower or storm, but most places will likely stay quiet. Get your full forecast on WWAY and WWAYTV3.com.
This news and weather is brought to you by Two Men and a Truck. For your free quote, go to twomenandatruck.com. Twomenandatruck.com.
Well, life on the farm is kind of laid back. Ain't much an old country boy like me can't hack. It's early to rise, early in the sack. I thank God I'm a country boy. Well, a simple kind of life never did me no harm. Raising me a family and working on the farm. Days are all filled with an easy country charm. Thank God I'm a country boy. Well, I got me a fine wife, I got me old fiddle. When the sun's coming up, I got cakes on the griddle. Life ain't nothing but a funny, funny riddle. Thank God I'm a country boy. When the work's all done and the sunset low, pull out my fiddle and the rosin up.
By now, if you've tuned into the program over the past, almost 4 years, you've become accustomed to hearing this voice on Wednesdays, typically inside our second hour of the show, but we had a bit of a scheduling snafu today, but the keeper of the public purse always wants to share his thoughts with the Cape Fear region here across southeastern North Carolina. And without further ado, let's bring in State Treasurer Dale Folwell. Treasurer, it's always a pleasure, and it's great to speak with you again. I hope your week is off to a great start, and we're here on Wednesday following the Labor Day holiday. Good morning, sir.
Good morning, and thanks for adjusting your schedule. I've got to speak to the Monroe Union County Rotary Club this morning, and so I appreciate you accommodating this. And as you were leading in with the news, I just want to tell you that our hearts continue to be with the students and citizens of New Hanover County. In my neighborhood in Winston-Salem, we obviously had a deadly shooting at Mount Tabor High School last week, and so just a reminder of where we are in the world these days.
Treasurer, without getting into the weeds too much, on specific incidents, particularly within our schools, but in talking school safety or anything related to the system or government as a whole, why is it in your mind that our government is so reactionary to issues that we face in our society instead of being proactive? I mean, isn't that what leadership is supposed to be about? Being ahead of the curve and, making that pitch to constituents out there that we need to, take these measures in order to try and prevent this or that instead of just throwing money at a problem and hoping something sticks and that, the constituency forgets about it until the next incident occurs and there's uproar. And not just school safety. I mean, it seems like every issue that our country faces, we are always more reactionary rather than being proactive on something.
You're exactly right. And, I've talked about this in relation to the state's finances in the past that, which is something I didn't learn when I was younger, and that is that if you do what you're supposed to do during the semester, the final exam's not so difficult. And what we haven't done during the semester, so to speak, with public schools, especially when you see the reports that came out yesterday about what's happening, especially in urban school districts as far as the proficiency ratings, we just haven't focused on where the real problems are. We refuse to really actually talk about the real problems, and this is becoming a crisis that obviously is spilling over in the school. When you have schools with 20% proficiency in English or 25% proficiency in math, I'm not sure what's going on there. And I was on the school board for 8 years. I'm on the state Board of Education, and this is not an indictment of any administrator or any member of the school board. It's just the fact that our society has gotten to the point where these schools are asked to do a lot more than just teach children.
And there's no question that we can say that it starts in the home, and it takes a village and a well-rounded community to help raise our young and point them in the right direction. Not that everyone is going to take the right pathway, but there are so many different opportunities, it seems like these days, so many different organizations, groups, nonprofits, the philanthropic work, so many different people, supposedly, paying attention to these issues, and nothing seems to be getting better in any, tangible way.
Our time this morning is obviously going into a different direction, but last night, for example, I was watching a recent documentary that just came out about Freddie Mercury and Queen, and one of my professors at Winston-Salem State was his childhood friend, Subha Shah. He lives in Winston-Salem, North Carolina. He's actually in this documentary, and my point of bringing that up to your listeners is that it doesn't matter what documentary you watch, what Oscar speech you listen to, what article you might read in the newspaper, all of us are standing on the shoulders of someone else. And the fact is we've sort of lost that in our society, the importance of standing on the shoulders of other people. And as we talk about the subjects related to the state treasurer, yesterday the extended federal unemployment benefits ended. And my reason for bringing this into that into this conversation, Joe, is that we're federal unemployment benefits have a cap. There's absolutely no upward mobility with unemployment benefits or joy of achievement, and we've got to get joy of achievement and upward mobility back into the mindset of our citizens.
State Treasurer Dale Folwell with us here this morning, and you kind of segued into a topic that I was going to bring up with you, and the fact that, as you mentioned, that these pandemic unemployment benefits have expired here in North Carolina. We were kind of late to the party, so to speak, in that other states have distanced themselves from this extra portion of benefits for several months now elsewhere around the country. About 100,000 North Carolinians were still receiving those extra benefits as of last week, despite the fact that there are help wanted signs on nearly every storefront across every industry that we offer here in North Carolina and through its economy. Why do you think there continues to be staff and worker shortages across all industries in the state? How do we get people back to work?
I think that the events that happened yesterday, as far as this benefit expiring, is going to do something in that regard. It's not going to be a revolution. It's not going to happen tomorrow, but I think we'll slowly start finding the correct equilibrium that we've had in the state for a long period of time, matching workers with employers. And I just always like to remind your listeners that anytime that we talk about federal unemployment benefits, there's three things I'd like for them to know. One is that when they ever hear something called the unemployment rate, it only includes, I repeat, it only includes those who are able, available, and actually seeking employment. When you didn't have work requirements to be seeking employment, therefore those people weren't even in the unemployment rolls. It's like hearing the inflation number without food and energy, even though we can't live without either one of those two things. The second thing I'd like to remind your listeners is that we talk about this in relation to business, and the biggest business in this state is the state. The second biggest business in this state are the school systems. The third biggest are the counties and then the cities. My point of telling you that is that this unemployment crisis is not just afflicting the restaurants and the manufacturing operations and the hospitals. It's actually afflicting the essential services of the state and local government because we are the largest employers.
State Treasurer Dale Folwell with us here this morning. He joins us twice a month on Wednesdays. This morning, a little earlier than usual because, as he mentioned at the top, he has a speaking engagement with a Rotary Club here in the state. Treasurer Folwell, you often make these public appearances at these civic-minded events and talk about Rotary. We have thriving organizations here in the southeastern part of North Carolina. Talk about those who spend time, maybe once a month or a couple of times a month, of like-minded individuals who want to put community first and want to hear from people like you. What are some of the things that you'll be discussing today with the Monroe County Rotary Club in just a little while?
Monroe, the city of Monroe in Union County, which is one county east of Charlotte. And the thing that comes to mind for that Rotary Club or the Rotary Clubs in the Cape Fear area is that they do what we try to do at the Treasurer's Office on a daily basis, and that is they advocate for the invisible. Whether it's the rubber duck regatta or all pancakes or whatever else they do to raise money and contribute back to the community with assistance or scholarships or all the other things. Nobody the recipients of those services really don't know what all went into that, but the Rotary Clubs always advocate for the invisible, which is something I appreciate. The second thing I appreciate is that it gives me goosebumps, which, as you may know, is one of the only bodily functions you can't absolutely control. It gives me goosebumps to think of where our communities, where our state, and where our country could be right now, especially now, if all public servants and elected officials adopt the four-way test of Rotary International, as well as the motto of service above self. If we just all started from that platform, it's just unimaginable what we could accomplish. So when I speak to the Cape Fear groups or the one in Union County this morning, I talk about the state of the state because there's a lot of the Rotarians who are participants in this pension plan or at the local and state level. I talk about transparent health care, but also talk about service above self.
And with that said, Treasurer, I feel that you are one of those elected officials who put service above self, because you have no problem calling it the way you see it, whether it be a Republican issue, a Democrat issue. You try and call it straight down the middle, and you make no bones about it. And that's one of the things that I think is mostly admired by many across North Carolina, which is why you're always and have been, at least as your time at Treasurer, as one of the leading vote getters of all statewide elected candidates. What does that say about yourself, or what do you see that being a testament of when you see yourself getting more votes than President Donald Trump, for instance, in the previous election,
or President Biden or Secretary Clinton? And what I see is that I've always raised my hand to volunteer for the toughest jobs, and obviously being the keeper of the public purse with an amount of money that's 10 times larger than the state budget is a very difficult job, and I'm standing on the shoulders of a lot of great people. But the main thing is that, especially today, people really don't give a darn what political party you're a member of. When President Trump came in with his executive order to help me and the rest of the country with transparent health care, I applauded President Trump. When President Biden came in 9 weeks ago and increased the penalties for people not complying with transparent health care, I praised President Biden. My point is that people, your listeners, really don't care what political party a person's a member of, and they just want their problems solved. And the problems they're facing right now are job, food, health, and educational insecurity and uncertainty. And as I've said many times on your show, with all the things dividing our state these days, whether it's political party or race or gender, there's none of that at the Treasurer's Office. It's all green. And the blood that runs through me is Quaker, and one of the spices of the Quaker religion is to be fair and just. We do not pick and choose which laws to apply or who to apply them to. And not only was I gratified to get more votes than both all presidential candidates in the last two elections, but also every newspaper endorsement across North Carolina.
And that, my friends, is why he is one of the best in the business. That's State Treasurer Dale Folwell. Treasurer, I know you have a lot of admirers here in this area. In fact, a number of them attended the Lincoln Reagan annual dinner up in Hampstead and Pender County. And I know they say hello to you this morning as you bring the news from Raleigh back here to Wilmington twice a month here on the Big Talker FM. As always, thanks a lot.
Thank you, and look forward to seeing you in a couple of weeks.
That's State Treasurer Dale Folwell, once again, the keeper of the public purse here in the state of North Carolina. Joins us twice a month on Wednesdays here on the Big Talker 106.7 FM.
There has never been a better time to go to college. Class of 2021 high school graduates, you don't want to miss this. You may be eligible to have your tuition and fees covered at Cape Fear Community College for 2 years, beginning this fall through the North Carolina Longleaf Commitment Grant. This is money that does not need to be repaid and covers tuition toward a degree or towards transfer credit to a 4-year school. This is your chance to make it happen at CFCC for free. Find out more at cfcc.edu/NC Grant.
Cozy season right around the corner. Fluffy blankets, pumpkin lattes, new window treatments that make you happy to stay indoors. Our friends at Blinds.com, they make it easy and affordable to install window treatments. Now you get to choose from hundreds of styles. You get advice from a Blinds.com designer, absolutely free. Fall in love with your home. Just go to Blinds.com and save up to 35% off site-wide. Blinds.com, rules and restrictions may apply. Warner Brothers Pictures presents Cry Macho, a story of being lost and found as Clint Eastwood returns as Mike Milo, a one-time rodeo star who then takes a job from an ex-boss to bring the man's young son home from Mexico. The unlikely pair face a challenging journey. The only road home is through redemption. Now, you'll be able to see it in theaters and on HBO Max for 31 days, September the 17th. It's rated PG-13, may be inappropriate for kids under 13.
We interrupt to bring you this horrible news. Experts say we'll see larger numbers and different breeds of mosquitoes to wreak havoc on your backyard, making this year one of the worst.
Anopheles and Culex rati mosquito.
Yeah. Experts also say there is only one defense against this onslaught. Call the Bugman from Bugno Pest Control.
That's Mr. Bugno to you, pal.
Bugno Pest Control's mosquito-killing formula keeps your yard bug-free. Call Bugno Pest Control, 910-367-2501, or visit BugnoPestControl.com. Take back your yard.
With a customer referral rating of 96%, Two Men in a Truck Wilmington has proven time and time again they are the top local choice when it comes to all of your moving needs. Offering a wide range of professional moving services, including local and long-distance moving, business relocations, both full or partial packing services and storage, Two Men in a Truck is dedicated to exceed customer expectations and reliability, quality of service, and care. To start your quote, log on to twomenandatruck.com or call 910-210-0224. Among stories you're going to find nowhere else across the Cape Fear region. News item pops up in my inbox just a few minutes ago, about an hour or so ago, giving us an update as far as the numbers are concerned at New Hanover Regional Medical Center. A lot of talk over the last few weeks in regards to hospitalizations and the rise in cases due to the Delta variant. Not the lambda, the Delta variant. In fact, according to this memo sent out within New Hanover Regional Medical Center, our local hospital has shown a steady decline in COVID patients since the peak last week. At the time, they were averaging 132 patients. By Tuesday afternoon, meaning yesterday, they had fewer than 90 COVID patients. They've been able to make some beds available for non-COVID patients within the local hospital. Brunswick Medical Center had about 15 COVID patients as of yesterday, but they, in fact, were experiencing a high volume of non-COVID patients over the past week. The New Hanover Regional Medical Center monoclonal antibody infusion clinic also remained open over the holiday weekend. The system, including Pender Memorial Hospital, has administered more than 450 infusions so far of the monoclonal antibody therapeutic that is said to have, about 80% efficacy when it comes to preventing hospitalizations and death related to COVID when administered early on in the diagnosis. Why that hasn't been adopted in earlier, not only here, but elsewhere around the country. Of course, they criticized Florida Governor Ron DeSantis for promoting that over, now, almost 2 months ago. Nonetheless, news, the numbers, you're going to find nowhere else other than right here on the Big Talker FM this morning. When we get back, hit your calls between now and 8:30 at 910-299-7535.
Keeping Ocean Isle informed. The Big Talker 106.7 FM WFBT, Carolina Beach.
Who were once held at Gitmo. The post of Interior Minister goes to Sirajudin Haqqani. The FBI has a $5 million bounty on his head. Senator Ben Sasse describing Haqqani as a bloodthirsty terrorist, armed, dangerous, and running a country that we just abandoned. Risking life and limb, women continue taking to the streets of Afghan cities, as the BBC's Yogita Lamaye explains.
In the face of Taliban forces who are coming out and firing gunshots in the air, in some cases beating them, they're still marching the streets. We've had dozens of women, not just in Kabul, but in Badakhshan province as well, coming out today. We are hearing that those protests have been dispersed by the Taliban and that some protesters and some reporters who were covering those protests have been detained.
Hecklers gave President Biden an earful yesterday as he toured storm damage in New Jersey. They blasted him on Afghanistan, and they mocked the president for linking natural disasters, which they say have always happened, to climate change. Purely manufactured nonsense. That's how Florida Republican Governor Ron DeSantis describes talk of him running for president in 2024.
I just do my job. We work hard. Obviously, our state, has led on a lot of things.
The governor's dismissal of a 2024 run has some Trump supporters pumped up. They're pulling for Mr. Trump to jump into the race. Some 131 years after it was erected, a towering statue of Confederate General Robert E. Lee being removed today in Richmond, Virginia. Wall Street, so far this morning, stock futures have been mixed. Right now, Dow futures down a dozen points. NASDAQ futures 1 point higher. S&P futures 1 point lower. More on these stories at townhall.com.
Excuse me, why don't you have life insurance yet?
I've got diabetes, and I know the price will be through the roof for the pre-existing condition.
Well, actually, SelectQuote makes it easy to get very affordable life insurance, even if you have a health issue.
I'm listening.
You'll get quotes from some of the country's most trusted carriers. Even with your diabetes, you can get around $250,000 in insurance for as little as $1 a day.
That would be amazing. What's it called again?
SelectQuote. Just call or go to SelectQuote.com to get your free quote. Get the coverage you need at a price you can afford. Call 1-800-694-1010 or go to SelectQuote.com today. That's 1-800-694-1010 or SelectQuote.com. SelectQuote. We shop. You save. Get full details on example policy at SelectQuote.com/commercials. Monthly premiums vary based on health company and other factors. Not available in all states.
France has launched the trial of 20 men accused in the deadly 2015 ISIS attack on Paris, left 130 people dead, hundreds injured. The BBC's Hugh Schofield is in the French capital.
It's been turned into a historic event. The whole of the Ile de la Cité here in central Paris has been sealed off by security. There's the special courtroom that has been put up inside, and it is going to be filmed, and it will therefore not just be a place where justice is delivered, but a place where the facts will be documented surrounding this event that scarred the nation.
9 gunmen and suicide bombers struck within minutes of each other on November 13th of 2015. Survivors of the attacks, as well as those who mourn their dead, are packing the courtrooms designed to hold 1,800 plaintiffs and 350 lawyers. News and analysis, townhall.com. Iran continues building its stockpile of highly enriched uranium that could be used to produce nuclear weapons.
That's in contravention of a 2015 accord with world powers that was meant to contain Tehran's nuclear program. The International Atomic Energy Agency also told member states its verification and monitoring activities have been seriously undermined since February by Iran's refusal to let inspectors access IAEA monitoring equipment. The IAEA's Director General said he was willing to travel to Iran to meet the recently elected government for talks on the topic. Two cameras that the agency installed at one site in Iran have been severely damaged. Keith Peters reporting.
There will be something missing at 2 Whole Foods stores opening next year, the rows of cashiers. Amazon says it will bring its cashierless technology to 2 Whole Foods stores for the first time. More on these stories at townhall.com.
The champ is here! The champ is here! The champ is here! The champ is here!
Let me tell you something you already know. The world ain't all sunshine and rainbows. It's a very mean and nasty place, and I don't care how tough you are, it will beat you to your knees and keep you there permanently if you let it. You, me, or nobody is gonna hit as hard as life. But it ain't about how hard you hit. It's about how hard you can get hit and keep moving forward. How much you can take and keep moving forward. That's how winning is done.
When the moon hits your eye like a big pizza pie, that's amore. When the world seems to shine like you've had too much wine, that's amore.
Well, as we try and provide perspective and insight like no one else does here in southeastern North Carolina each and every morning, we will pick up the second hour of our show right where we left off with an email I received in my inbox about an hour or so ago looking at the COVID numbers at our local hospital. For those that may have missed the previous segment, looks like there's been a steady decline in COVID-related hospitalizations over at New Hanover Regional Medical Center over the past week. Fewer than 90 COVID-related patients remain at the hospital. Brunswick Medical Center has 15 COVID patients, and in fact, they have seen an influx of non-related COVID hospitalizations over the past week. 450-plus infusions have been administered through the monoclonal antibody therapeutic in our area since the hospital announced that it had been administering these therapeutics across the 3-county area of New Hanover, Brunswick, and Pender counties. 86% of Novid Health employees at the local hospitals have received at least one dose of a COVID vaccine. And remember that Novant Health extended its deadline to September 14th. It made that announcement a few weeks ago for all of its employees to get the jab, and they, of course, did that without saying it because, well, in my mind, they extended the deadline in all likelihood because they haven't been able to convince a certain portion of healthcare workers within their system to get the shot. So we'll see how that shakes out over the next week or so until that deadline, with that deadline fast approaching. Just one of the headlines making news this morning. That story, again, you're finding it nowhere else today here except the Big Talker FM. Questions, of course, continue to arise stemming from the shooting at New Hanover High School last week. And in typical form, we touched on it just a bit yesterday. And frankly, I was just starting to get my sea legs coming out of the holiday weekend and really did not take a deeper dive into some of the talking points that were highlighted during last Friday's meeting of elected officials and others, where it was announced that county commissioners allocated at the tune of $350 million to, quote-unquote, stop the violence. In fact, tomorrow we'll be speaking with New Hanover County Commissioner Deb Hayes. Spoke briefly with her via email yesterday, and she'll be with us, 24 hours from now, when she joins us to give her thoughts on the $350 million. Of course, we highlighted this conversation just a bit when Treasurer Dale Folwell joined us, why it seems as if our elected officials are always behind the 8 ball and on this learning curve when it comes to reactionary policy and just trying to throw money at a problem without any sort of detailed plan. Well, we allocate the money, and now we come up with the plan. And in terms of school safety and security, this is not a new subject. And in fact, it should be at the forefront, particularly of our local school board. On a day-to-day basis, it shouldn't take a shooting at a school for this conversation to be at the top of their agenda. Instead, well, within New Hanover County, you've seen the bickering, the drama, the inability to keep control of a room, the lack of leadership, frankly, within that board. It's not just this current board. It's been this way for a long, long time, as we have highlighted on this show for a long, long time. But I mean, hey, we throw $350 million, and we'll come up with the plan here in a couple of months to figure out how we're going to spend that money. Is there any scenario there where we say, well, we don't need $350 million to stop the violence, so maybe just $30 million or $100,000? Fat chance. They're allocating the money, and you bet your bottom dollar that they're going to spend it in one way, shape, or form for the betterment of our community, of course. And I mean, hey, city council members met last night and voted to extend the Black Lives Do Matter mural. That'll be up for another year at Gervais Park as you roll into the downtown area on 3rd Street. So, I mean, we're allocating millions without a document detailing how we're going to, hundreds of millions, by the way, without any sort of document or blueprint as to how we're going to move that conversation forward. And heck, we've got a mural as you come into downtown Wilmington, solving all of our problems. And as I highlighted in the first hour of our show, here in New Hanover County in particular, there's a trend here. Well, most of these boards and those in elected office happen to have a D next to their name. Democrat city, Democrat county. And during these discussions, whether it was on Friday or whether it was at the city council meeting yesterday, the reasoning why this Black Lives Do Matter mural was posted in the first place was, well, because of the educational, economic gaps and the injustices that, some have been calling attention to across our country, which is the reason why cities were burning last year, apparently. And amongst these discussions, I did not hear once among these Democrat leaders, we'll use that term loosely, over the past several years, by the way, as we highlight here on this program on a nearly daily basis, well, there's been an effort going on within the North Carolina General Assembly by the Republican-led legislature. Again, not that you're hearing any of this from the Democrat counterparts at the local level discussing the need for the Black Lives Do Matter mural to remain in place, or, the $350 million going to stop the violence. Well, over the last several years, the Republican-led legislature has enacted historic criminal justice reform here in our state, getting little to no fanfare, whether it be the Raise the Act legislation or the Second Chance Act or the First Step Act. You can go look into the details as far as what those legislative ideas include. The First Step Act, by the way, overturned the mandatory minimum sentences that were imposed by, you guessed it, Democrats, including Roy Cooper, who at the time was serving as a state senator in the General Assembly, only to then spend a good portion of his political career as the Attorney General before he became the governor, and then actually signed a bill. How about that? A governor who has issued more veto stamps than all other governors combined here in North Carolina's state history, actually signs a piece of legislation pushed by Republicans, which included multiple reforms in regards to law enforcement, in regards to other issues within the criminal justice system. Little to no fanfare, not once was brought up, in the discussion yesterday, of course, not that we would expect it to be amongst discussions that are being held in places like council chambers at City Hall, which is why we have to call attention to it to help provide the balancing act so you have all of the information in a well-rounded way so you can come to your own conclusions on the issues facing our society and the approach that one group of people are taking as compared to others. Apparently, New Hanover High School and their administration within the school has decided that they will implement a new clear bag policy beginning in October. In fact, one of our good listeners, Alan, had mentioned that there are clear bag policies elsewhere around the state, including in Robeson County. We had a caller from the early hour of our show as we were highlighting some of the statements made last Friday, one by Judge Corpening, who there have been calls and questions as to why there haven't been metal detectors in the schools and whether or not that sort of measure should be implemented to try and help deter violence within the schools. Well, the judge says and said during the meeting on Friday, well, metal detectors show no tangible results, and ultimately it just makes kids feel like they're in prison, and this shooting would have likely occurred somewhere else if it hadn't been on school grounds. Well, okay, I can agree with some of that, but the fact of the matter is you weren't able to provide, and you did not, or you just happened to forget the research to back up your statement that metal detectors don't necessarily deter violence. And the fact that within the schoolhouse, well, school administrators from staff to the principal, all the way up to the school board, it is their responsibility when it comes to the safety and security of school children inside the schoolhouse. And that, well, when they are in the streets, there's nothing much the schoolhouse can do so long as internally they are doing what they need to be doing to make sure they're doing their best to, of course, keep our kids safe. Again, and then we had a caller who actually had to go in front of the judge and said, listen, I presented in my case. I've been waiting 6 years to say something about the judge. I presented my case in a civil matter and a child custody matter, and I brought all sorts of evidence to back up some of the things that I wanted to make known in the court, and, well, he disregarded all of it. So, again, I guess the judge apparently doesn't need much evidence to lay out there as far as why certain ideas work or don't. Just take him for his word. So there'll be a clear bag policy implemented at New Hanover High School beginning in October 11th, I believe. And after remaining silent in regards to the violence in our city and across our area, after remaining silent for the last month and a half following the double homicide at his son's house, there's been a lot of talk around George Taylor, the founder of True Colors Brewing. In fact, True Colors has not yet sold a beer, wholesale or retail, after, well, he says that there have been a number of obstacles and hurdles that they've had to leap over and jump through in order to get this process underway. And in fact, George reached out to me last week, or maybe it was 2 weeks ago, and we actually met here at the office, as I highlighted in the first hour, for, well, over an hour. And frankly, I told him I was unwilling to go take a tour of True Colors because I still have many uncertainties about his approach and, well, those who are employed by the company. I don't necessarily feel like I need to go there for any reason. Now, that doesn't mean I'll meet and talk about things, because frankly, I didn't know George personally and never really kind of grasped his line of thinking when it comes to gang violence and when it comes to, the streets. So we met, and after the conversation on Friday with the county commission, the school board, law enforcement officials, and others, well, they immediately, of course, signed up, as we highlighted, to allocate $350 million towards, quote unquote, stopping the violence here locally. Well, George actually penned an open letter to our elected officials, and it's been published at the Greater Wilmington Business Journal. And I agree with some of the things he had to say. Before we just throw hundreds of millions of dollars towards a problem, maybe we should look for a different way to approach all of this. That's not to say that I necessarily agree wholeheartedly with, his approach. but we talk about reactionary decisions made by our quote-unquote leaders, our elected officials, and I think George and I line up on what was decided back on Friday without any sort of game plan or blueprint or information out there on how we should move forward to try and, deter all of this. It was, well, let's just throw $350 million. Nice round number out there. No one knows what's going to be used for now after we allocate the money. So we've got to, pass the bill before we read what's in it. Let's just make sure we put the money aside and now we'll figure out how to spend it. Well, why not come up with a detailed bullet point plan on how we're going to address it and then decide how we're going to allocate money, towards making a difference? If we even, in fact, need more investment for this specific issue. So I'd encourage you to read that open letter that's been published at the Business Journal by the founder of True Colors Brewing. And while I agree with some of the things he had to say, and during our discussion, admittedly, he made me think and posed questions that I didn't really have answers to as far as what's going on within the streets and, the overall approach that, some are taking, others ignoring. And then once in a while, a news organization will, peddle out an anchor and try to calm the fears of everyone in the area, settle things down. In fact, I took about 2 pages of notes from our conversation with George, and I'm going to kind of just lay them out for you as I felt like I was back in school, like laying out notes. And I'm going to try and lay those out for you over the next day or so. I think we'll have some time tomorrow. Rather than present, my opinion first and then the notes, let's deliver the notes to you and the details and the information, because one of the beautiful things about what we do here is that we are more than just a 30-second soundbite or a 2-minute package that's put together for the broadcast news networks. We're able to dig into a specific issue at length, and if it catches your ear, we can explore it even further. And I mean, 2 pages of notes from our conversation with George Taylor, and we're going to lay that out for you maybe tomorrow so you can get a more inside look to what he believes and their approach. I think there are some good things about it. I think there are some things that necessarily I'm kind of on the fence on, and maybe some that I disagree with. But challenging one another and coming together with someone that you may not typically talk about very important topics with, these are how the ball gets moved forward. This is how the ball gets moved forward, rather than just saying, hey, here's a couple $100 million, figure it out. So on one hand, you want to give the stakeholders, the elected officials, and others who met back on Friday, you want to commend them for taking it seriously and looking to do something. But on the opposite side of all of this, you have to ask yourself, why does it have to take a shooting, a traumatic event for the system to react? Why are we reacting rather than being proactive? That's the job of our elected officials, to look ahead, particularly when it comes to school safety. That should be the top on the list of things that are looked at on a monthly basis amongst our school officials. Getting a report from the superintendent, getting a report from the administrative staff at the area schools, and seeing which measures may work, which ones don't, challenging one another. Because when you look, frankly, at the history of this county and the school board in particular, I mean, addressing concerns with the school-based administration, well, that doesn't seem to work. In fact, the previous superintendent and the now retired deputy superintendent had to leave in disgrace because of the mishandling of, and frankly, the cover-up of sexual misconduct amongst employees within the system for decades. And now the commissioners will throw some chum at the system and the symptoms of the issues. I mean, at the end of the day, who is accountable to our children and you, the taxpayer? I mean, do we even know for sure that the officials that met on Friday truly know or understand what the problems are? Or are they just unwilling to lay it out there because they may hurt someone's feelings or their chances to, get a vote in the next election. In fact, even the superintendent of New Hanover County Schools, according to PortCityDaily.com, denied. And they mentioned that he and others were unaware of the issues at New Hanover High School that led up to last Monday's shooting, despite the fact that the mom of the kid who carried out the shooting has sang a different tune over the course of the last several days. In fact, according to this report over at Port City Daily, the superintendent denied receiving any sort of verification of bullying involving the incident back on Monday. Now, they qualified that sentence by saying it's unclear whether his comments were referring to the mother's claims that kid's been bullied, jumped on multiple occasions, and ultimately, felt his life was in danger, which is somehow, some way, how he got a gun and brought it to school. Now, that's a horse of a different color when it comes to, how he gained access to a gun and brought it to school. But nonetheless, how many times you had to get beat up by multiple kids before you try and take matters into your own hands after those in charge of providing safety and security for you don't seem to be interested in doing so. Within the school, outside on the streets, not much school officials could do. But in the schoolhouse, that's part of their job. So how did we get here? Well, given what our school district has been going through over the past 2 decades, the cover-up stemming from the sexual misconduct, the criminal behavior of its teachers. I mean, these sorts of things, when it comes to safety, security, the willingness to talk and openly make your frustrations and concerns heard. Well, in fact, when you do, they shut the meeting down and then they hide behind a computer screen and go all virtual. But it's a word that many consider to hold close to their hearts, and that is the word trust. And at this point, our families, our community, our students do not trust the local school district. Trust requires relationship. It also requires, when concerns are brought forward, that they are heard and dealt with. And our community has no confidence in this process because, problems consistently go unsolved and unresolved. How about the administration, the elected school officials, and others, look in the mirror and say, maybe it's something we're doing, or maybe we can better ourselves internally rather than pointing the finger. Because, in fact, New Hanover County Schools helped create this culture over the course of the better part of 20 years. And maybe instead of going on the defense, the superintendent could say, hey, listen, this is on me. This is on our school board. This is on the school system. And let's work to find viable, sustaining solutions. And let's develop a plan. And then, if we need to go to our county commissioners for investment or funding, then at that point, when we have that detailed plan and we lay it out, will we seek the funds to carry out some of the solutions we feel will make a dent in the issue? I think there are a number of questions stemming from what occurred on Monday, 2 Mondays back at New Hanover High School. Will we ever get answers to those questions? Well, I would just say don't hold your breath. When we get back, Brooke Medina is going to join us with the John Locke Foundation. Of course, you know by now that, we've been found here in southeastern North Carolina, no longer laying in the weeds and hoping that, many across the country won't find us. We've got, pretty much the only open space along the entire Atlantic seaboard left right here between, Myrtle Beach and Jacksonville. Literally, the only stretch of land that is underdeveloped or remains undeveloped is this stretch here on the coast. And in the state of North Carolina as a whole, we're a booming state. Thousands upon thousands upon thousands of people each year are looking at the Tar Heel State as a possible destination to live, work, and play, and to grow a family or open up a business. And there are various reasons why. Well, Brooke over at the John Locke Foundation recently took a look at some of the significant population growth that we've seen over the past decade. We've seen so many people coming into the area. According to the latest census numbers, North Carolina, actually, under redistricting that is now being discussed up in Raleigh, the Tar Heel State going to gain an additional congressional seat for the midterms in 2022. When we get back, Brooke will shed some light on the trends that we're seeing across the country that has attracted tens of thousands of new residents to places like North Carolina, Texas, Arizona, the state of Florida. Brooke will tell us why when we get back here on the Big Talker 106.7 FM.
Hey, this is Matt Ham, co-founder of Uprint and the co-host of Wake Up Our Faith, every Saturday and Sunday right here in Wilmington's Big Talker. We invite you to join with our nonprofit movement by participating in the Portable Faith Community. This is a $10 a month tax-deductible contribution, and you get access to daily encouragement, resources, as well as our prayer community. You can go to wakeupmyfaith.com to get subscribed and learn more. That's wakeupmyfaith.com.
Hi, this is Justin Humphreys from the Humphreys Law Firm on Eastwood Road. The Humphreys Law Firm is located in Lumina Station, Wilmington, North Carolina, practices civil litigation, intellectual property, commercial, and residential real estate. Please give us a call at 910-332-0721 or visit us on our website, which is www.humphreysfirm.law. You can also listen to me every Thursday from 6 to 7 p.m. on the Big Talker 106.7 FM.
One Love Tennis started in 2013 to give back to young boys and girls. We now go through 460 kids a week that are learning about life skills, learning to succeed in life through academics and tennis. Putting those two together, if you do them well, you can write your own ticket. To get involved in this program, go to our website, one-love-tennis.org.
Wake up to Good Morning Carolina, weekdays at 5:30 a.m.
And Good Morning Carolina. It is a very busy news morning today. I'm Donna Gregory.
And I'm Jeff Rivenbark. We're glad you're starting your Tuesday with us.
Be prepared and ready to go for the day ahead.
For the time being, we are dry and quiet, but we are dealing with some patchy fog.
And catch up with the overnight news you need to know before heading out the door.
We'll have more details and more live coverage in just a few moments.
Get up early for Good Morning Carolina, weekdays at 5:30 a.m.
I'm a boat builder. It's a tough job that takes time, patience, and precision. It's also incredibly rewarding. How many people can say they built a boat from scratch? In our area, there's a great need for people who can build and repair boats. I turned my love for life on the water into a career that I truly enjoy. I went to CFCC for 2 years, got my training, and now I look forward to work every day. You can too. Visit cfcc.edu/boatbuilding and get started today.
Hello, I'm Jeff Rivenbark with WWAY News. A powerful earthquake has struck in southern Mexico near the Pacific resort city of Acapulco, causing buildings to rock and sway in Mexico City, hundreds of kilometers away. At least one death has been reported. The U.S. Geological Survey says last night's magnitude 7 quake was centered northeast of Acapulco. The mayor says there are no serious problems, though gas leaks and fallen walls were reported. In Virginia today, crews are set to remove one of the country's largest remaining monuments to the Confederacy, a towering statue of Robert E. Lee in Richmond. The bronze likeness of Lee on a horse will be hoisted off its 40-foot pedestal 131 years after it was erected in the former capital of the Confederacy. While many saw the statue as an offensive tribute to the South's slave-holding past, public officials had long resisted its removal. Back here in the Cape Fear, the city of Northwest is exploring options to maintain its police department rather than turning over law enforcement duties to the Brunswick County Sheriff's Office. There was a heartfelt plea from some of the citizens of Northwest after it was revealed city leaders were considering disbanding the police department and contracting with the Brunswick County Sheriff's Office for law enforcement services. The department currently employs a chief and 2 officers, and the chief is set to retire at the end of the month. Some worry outsourcing to the county could create safety concerns. And more than a week after a shooting at New Hanover High School in which a student was injured, the campus announcing a new security policy. The principal sent out an alert Monday requiring clear backpacks at the school. The requirement goes into effect October 11th. A spokesperson for the district says they're also in the process of developing something for all 45 schools in New Hanover County. For more on these stories, head over to WWAYTV3.com. I'm Jeff Rivenbark. Have a great day.
Happy Wednesday, everybody. I'm WWAY meteorologist Ramel Carpenter with your Storm Track 3 forecast. Well, we are going to see another warm and humid day across the Cape Fear. If you're inland of the coast, we're going to see those highs jump into the upper 80s, perhaps the low 90s in a few neighborhoods. And closer to the coast, we're going to be jumping into the middle 80s for afternoon highs. We do have a high in risk for rip currents today, so stay out of the water today if you're headed out to the beach. And as we head into the afternoon hours, we do have a small chance for an afternoon shower or storm, but most places will likely stay quiet. Get your full forecast on WWAY and WWAYTV3.com.
This news and weather is brought to you by 2 Men and a Truck. For your free quote, go to 2menandatruck.com. 2menandatruck.com.
It's funny, anytime you hover over the target, all of a sudden during the breaks, your text messages start going off, the emails start blasting. I got to turn off my alerts and notifications. Your Facebook feed starts filling up with all sorts of messages. We must be on the right track here this morning because we are getting a ridiculous amount of feedback from folks with commentary on issues that we face right here in the Cape Fear region. And our issues, are no stranger to many of the things that many others are dealing with all across the country. But nonetheless, here in the state of North Carolina, we've got it pretty good. I mean, we are welcoming in thousands upon thousands of people each year, while other states continue to lose many of their residents and much of their population. In fact, the state of California losing residents for the first time ever. The state of New York losing a congressional seat. While here in the Tar Heel State, we continue to see gains. Another congressional district will be drawn once the legislative maps are released in the next couple of months, all ahead of the 2022 midterms. And in fact, our friend Brooke Medina with the John Locke Foundation took a look at some of the trends that we're seeing around the country and why North Carolina remains a destination state for many, whether it be in the Northeast, the Ohio Valley, even as far as the West Coast. People come into the Tar Heel State, and for good reason. Brooke, it's a pleasure as always, and I thank you so much for spending some time with us. I hope all is well with you this morning.
Hey, Joe. Thank you for having me again. I'm so excited to talk about this. And yes, all is well. It's a good day to be in North Carolina.
As it always is, particularly when you live about a mile and a half from the ocean. I mean, I'm not complaining, right now. Let's knock on wood that we get through the next month or so without any sort of, natural weather events. But with that said, I'm always interested in watching and seeing how these trends start to play out because North Carolina kind of has a little bit of everything. We've got beautiful coastlines. We've got the mountains out to the west. We've got the metro urban areas, if, that fits your fancy, and everywhere in between. There's something kind of for everybody here in the Tar Heel State, and, people are finding out about that and have been looking at that for the better part of the past decade, which is why I mentioned, we're gaining population, a congressional seat, and people are looking to live, work, and play here. What are you seeing based on the story that I saw you publish just a week or so ago at the John Locke Foundation?
Yes. So I was looking at some numbers related to the fastest growing cities in America. In North Carolina, out of the top 20, North Carolina has 3 of those. Charlotte at number 8 in the list of top 20. Concord, which is right outside of Charlotte. So I I'm guessing people couldn't all fit in Charlotte, so they just went to Concord, which is number 3 on this list of top 20, and then Raleigh is number 10. And this is consistent with numbers we're seeing all across the board as it pertains to growth here in North Carolina. We know in the past decade, nearly 1 million people have migrated into North Carolina from states such as California, like you mentioned. And despite the fact that we are geographically so far from California, we account for we're the top 7th in terms of Californians that have escaped and have chosen North Carolina as their state to call home. And so this is, it's incredible growth, but I think what is especially interesting is when you start layering this data of this growth over what we're seeing in terms of tax policy in North Carolina, housing policy, education, like it just all creates this sort of perfect cocktail of North Carolina being such a huge draw for people.
Cost of living comes to mind when it comes to why people are fleeing states like California, elsewhere, New York, New Jersey, and among others. As you said, high rates of taxation. When we look at the Tar Heel State, though, of course, those who have been around for quite some time, or even us transplants who came around 15, 16 years ago, who are kind of embedded now. I consider myself a North Carolinian, though my Southern friends will never consider me, a Southerner. I'll be a Yankee at heart until the day I die, whether it be here in North Carolina or elsewhere. Yet my friends to the north, now say, boy, you've got a little twang in the way in which you address us when you speak. So I'm kind of, a man without a home in one way, shape, or form. But I do follow, policy as it relates to, decisions made by our government, and wholeheartedly support a lot what's been going on in Raleigh. And that's the big, I think, tiff that people have. When you come here, leave some of your voting trends in places like California and New Jersey and New York. When we look at the demographics of people, do we have kind of a look at who's moving here and what they're moving here for?
Yeah. So, well, as far as it pertains to political demographics in particular, I think this is really interesting, and I think your audience will find it interesting. I was looking at the past decade of voter registration changes, which we have on CarolinaElections.com. That is a Locke-owned property, and our election policy analyst, Dr. Andy Jackson, updates this. And so what we've seen is that the unaffiliated voter has grown by 15%. So we've had a total of 990,000 new voter registrations in North Carolina since August 2011 to August of 2021. And out of that, 15% of them are unaffiliated, 3.8% are Republicans, and actually Democrats have lost 3.6%. So on the whole, over a past decade, unaffiliateds continue to rise. And based on the information we do have through our polling, which we do a statewide public opinion poll called the Civitas poll every 6 weeks, we're seeing that these unaffiliated voters that are coming in are generally leaning center-right. That doesn't mean they're always going to vote that way. Some of them will continue to sort of mix up their ballot and split their tickets, but generally center-right voters. And so we're not importing tons of progressive policies. That doesn't mean that we're not, there's not a need to be vigilant, because there is, as we've seen, especially in the cultural wars that have happened as of late all across the nation, and we're no stranger to those. But generally, we're seeing some interesting trends as it pertains to registered voters.
Well, and with that said, isn't that kind of a bit of a microcosm of North Carolina and its voting history, in that, typically Republican presidential candidate, seems to have a little more favorable look at things here in North Carolina. Our senatorial seats have been Republican for the last couple of years, and, well, it's very difficult to hold on to multiple terms if you're a U.S. senator, whether you're a Republican or a Democrat. And then you look at, the governorship, in fact, where Republicans haven't fared as well. We've had maybe 4 Republican governors ever in our state's history. But then at the federal level, we have Republican congressional, favorability. And then at the General Assembly, well, for 120 years, it was Democrats until Republicans swept in for the last 10 years. So we do kind of sway, with the pendulum here in North Carolina, depending on, which office is up for grabs every election cycle.
Yes, I would say politicians would do well to never take anything for granted here in North Carolina. We certainly are purple in many ways, and it seems clear that the voters here are completely comfortable with a divided government. And so, as you indicated, the Republicans took over the legislature about a decade ago, and actually since that point in time, we've made a lot of progress in terms of fiscally conservative policies. I mean, before 2010, when the Democrats held control, we saw a budget growth of 40% in 8 years, compared to a 16% budget growth over 8 years now. And so we've certainly narrowed our spending, and we've also lowered the personal income tax rate, the corporate income tax rate, and so it's creating a better climate. But again, I would warn and caution for politicians on either side of the aisle not to take anything for granted. And of course, we've got redistricting coming up.
You know, I'll never say never, but it's going to have to be a real attracting offer for me to move into one of these, major metro and urban areas, whether it be a Raleigh, a Charlotte, or elsewhere around the country. In fact, I've got maybe a short list of 2 or 3 cities that I would consider ever moving to. And again, the attraction there would have to be very lucrative for me to move in those directions, given where I live here on the coast and this, black hole sort of lifestyle that I live. Once you get here, it's very hard to leave for various reasons. Employment comes like second, third, maybe even fourth, on the list is why you want to try and stay here, for as much and as long as possible. When it comes to, the urban sprawl that we are seeing in places like Charlotte and Raleigh, as you mentioned, the voting trends don't necessarily line up with, urban areas being, heavily blue, but it's more of the suburban growth. How do we see, as part of these fast growing cities like Charlotte and Raleigh, how is their cities, what's their makeup look like right now? What are we seeing as far as, who's coming to live there?
Yeah, so it's interesting because Charlotte itself is, yes, it's generally blue. However, the counties surrounding Charlotte or those areas are pretty red. So it's kind of like a donut. And so there's that on the Charlotte area. And yes, I would agree that the suburbs of the Raleigh area, Apex, Fuquay, Varina, sometimes Cary, depends, those are leaning a little bit more red as well. And so there's these dynamics to contend with. And honestly, even at the local city level in Raleigh, for example, despite the fact that progressives have generally been a little bit more protectionist when it comes to zoning, although Republicans aren't any stranger to it either. But we're seeing some better zoning policies, which are creating more affordable housing across these urban areas. And so that creates the capacity for more voters to move into these areas. And I wouldn't take for granted that they're all going to be liberal voters. I think that there are some conservative ones moving in, especially as they've seen failed policies in the states that they've moved from. Of course, ask me that in 3 years, once Apple is already here. There's about 3,000 employees they're going to be bringing. We'll see what the political makeup looks like here in Raleigh. But even so, the suburbs, I think, are creating the sort of tension that we need to foster a little bit more innovation policy-wise at the local level.
When we look at, and as you mentioned it, briefly just a moment ago, the quote-unquote culture wars that we're kind of facing in our society these days, and you say the trend here is that we're attracting sort of center-right perspectives that are moving into the area. Do you think a good portion of our population is waking up, that it seems as if there is one group of people within one side of the political spectrum that are hell-bent on pushing things that a lot of people are uncomfortable with when it comes to our schools, when it comes to just the general thought that if you have a different viewpoint that you should be shunned to the corner and with a dunce cap and put into silence because you may have a differing opinion on the societal issues that we have today?
Yeah, Joe, I've said this before, cancel culture is not sustainable, and people are getting sick and tired of it. And I don't know if it's just like in part because the pandemic has cooped us up and we've had enough of this, but there comes a point in time where people are, even those who lean left, are just like, this is ridiculous. We can't keep up with this anymore. And actually on that point, I would say this is where there is a dividing line between what I would call a liberal and a progressive. many of the liberals, they actually believe that people should be allowed to voice their own opinions and be able to live their lives as they see fit in freedom, even if we disagree on some policies. But the far progressives that we see in D.C. and even locally, they cannot tolerate this. And so, politics is downstream from culture in many ways. And so what we're seeing, even at the General Assembly, in terms of like these non-discrimination bills, I think one of them is actually on the governor's desk right now, which is HB 324. It's waiting for his signature. But we're seeing a response at the legislative level to parents and other North Carolinians that are simply concerned that their voices are going to be drowned out by by laws. Now, it's one thing, and we see these arguments taking place in the private sector, and we're going to continue to debate the role of quote unquote big tech in all of this. But what I'm mostly concerned about is making sure that government does not get in the business of policing speech. That's not their role, and citizens are going to have to hash this out in the private sector like grown-ups.
Brooke Medina with the John Locke Foundation with us here this morning, looking at some of the different trends we're seeing as far as the movement of citizens across the country. In fact, you add in the Myrtle Beach metro area and then parts of Brunswick County here, along with Pender along the coast, didn't make the list. But we are amongst the most fastest growing area in the entire country as far as percentages go, despite our population being much less than a place like Raleigh or Charlotte. You look across the board here, we've got 4 of the fastest growing areas and cities in the nation right here in the Carolinas, from Charlotte to Concord to Raleigh and down to the Myrtle Beach area. Brooke, looking at some of those trends and looking at why people are moving to destinations like North, South Carolina, and elsewhere around the nation, Texas, Florida, for instance, among others. Brooke, when it comes to maybe 2 or 3 things that people are looking at when it comes to their movement here, we mentioned about the tax climate and the business climate. What else is there when it comes to things that are attracting so many different people from so many different regions of the country into a place like North Carolina?
One that maybe hasn't been discussed as often, and I'm really curious to see what our Dr. Terry Stoops and Dr. Bob Libke come up with. They are our education policy resources at John Locke, and that has to do with education. We know that the public school enrollment numbers continue to decline. Out of our 100 counties in North Carolina, last year only 2 of them experienced enrollment growth. So despite the fact that we have acquired nearly 1 million new residents over the past 10 years, the public school systems continue to lose enrollment of students. And so where are all of these kids going? Well, North Carolina is continuing to push forward with school choice policies, allowing families to make choices where the students are the ones that are funded rather than these school systems. And they are voting with their feet and their education choice dollars. And you're seeing that we lead the nation in terms of homeschool enrollment numbers. I mean, the state right behind us is Arkansas, and we more than double lead them in terms of homeschool enrollment numbers. And we also continue to lead in charter school enrollment and private school enrollment. So I would say actually our education options in the K-12 landscape are definitely attracting voters as well, and people to move over here.
And with that said, on that note, to close out, sort of when you look at educational issues and the idea of school choice, that crosses party lines. No, there are many on the left of the political scale that are open to that idea, particularly within minority communities across our state and all around the country.
Yes, that's exactly right. And the thing is, though, Governor Cooper, for example, and some of the legislators in the General Assembly, they continue to take these talking points from the North Carolina Educators Association, the NCAE, Association of Educators, and they have continued to politicize the classroom, which has, I believe, propelled this exodus. So I don't know why they continue to stay on the losing side of this instead of getting on the school board or school choice train. But the voters are clear on both sides of the aisle. School choice is a winning issue across the board.
I would say that there's a lot of money and a lot of political influence at stake if someone like a Governor Cooper were to jump ship and open his ears and eyes to some of the trends and the favorability of these school choice advocates. He'd lose a lot of his internal support, right? If he were to not flip flop, but see what we're all been seeing as far as trends and numbers go, as people being open to something outside of an archaic system that has failed to adjust for the better part of 100 years.
Definitely. He would lose some of that political capital with the teachers union, but honestly, even the teachers don't want the teachers union anymore. We actually launched a campaign, leavencaae.com, and there we have created a resource for teachers across the state to learn how they can save $500 a year because they will forego their paying the NCAE dues to be able to, solely prop up Democratic candidates, and they can actually leave this political union. And so if you go to leavencaae.com, we provide information on that because we continue to see the NCAE bleed numbers. And right now it only represents maybe 1 in every 5, 1 in every 6 teachers across the state.
And with that said, union membership across the board, not only within education, but within many other sectors of the workforce, they've been losing membership for a long, long time. And why? Well, that's because the upper echelons of these unions maybe have some different viewpoints and put their monies towards candidates and political ideals that don't necessarily line up with those who have boots on the ground.
Yeah, it's true. I mean, again, one of the appeals that we're making to teachers is, look, if you're tired of politics in the classroom, we know parents are tired of it, and many teachers are too. So if you're tired of it, don't continue to pay dues to these organizations that singularly support like 9 out of 10 Democratic candidates who become beholden to this education monopoly system. The voters are speaking loud and clear. They want school choice. They want politics out of the classroom. We want our kids to be educated. North Carolina, with the public school scores, we dropped 13% in terms of scoring and a number of measures because of learning loss. And yet the head of the NCAE, Tamika Kelly, is saying that learning loss is a false construct. It just boggles the mind. And once again, it's nothing that is actually helping our children. And so why would teachers and politicians continue to pay homage to this group that does not have the children's best interest in mind, and I would argue doesn't even have many teachers' best interest in mind?
Brooke Medina with the John Locke Foundation has a great look at some of the things going on within the state in terms of moving trends and where people are coming from throughout the country through their report at lockerroom.johnlocke.org. Brooke's report caught my attention last week. I'm always interested to see the migration trends as someone who migrated a long, long way from where I grew up to where I am today and have been for the better part of 16 years. And, hopefully we'll be here for, a long time thereafter to see, my child grow up in a place where, we're able to live affordably, enjoy our quality of life, and have opportunity, to help build up our family tree to create another generation of successful people and contributing members to our society right here in the Cape Fear region. Brooke, thanks so much for the time this morning, as always, and I hope you have a great day.
Thank you, Joe, and we're glad to have your family in North Carolina. Talk to you later.
Again, that's Brooke Medina looking at the top 20 ranked fastest growing cities here in America at lockerroom.johnlocke.org. As we head up to the top of the hour, great to catch up with Brooke of the John Locke Foundation. CarolinaJournal.com, of course, another element of what they do up in the Raleigh area, focusing in on statewide politics and government-related issues. We've got the legislative session that continues in Raleigh, keeping you up to date with all of the news coming out of the General Assembly as we try and bring Raleigh state government right back here to Wilmington on a daily basis with contributors such as Brooke, our state treasurer, Dale Folwell, among others. Looks like Lieutenant Governor Mark Robinson going to join us a little later on this week. Stay tuned for the date and time in which, a very popular Republican here in the state of North Carolina and all around the country, as he will join us to talk about this piece of legislation that he has helped push forward within the General Assembly and this task force he recently created to, request criticisms and other sorts of, issues within the public school system that parents, teachers, and other stakeholders have brought to his attention, among others, that he has put together through what is known as this FACTS task force that has recently released some information as far as their roles and responsibilities go based on what he has put forth as far as issues he sees within this public school system that we often talk about on a daily basis here on the Big Talker FM. When we get back, Richard Battle is in the holding pattern. Richard, of course, from the freedom-loving state of Texas, will be talking about leadership and how leaders, well, in fact, should face the heat when it comes to the different challenges that we face as a society, bringing accountability to the poor decisions that they make. Of course, here in New Hanover County, highlighting some of that today, putting the cart before the horse. Let's allocate some money, and then let's figure out what we should do with it in terms of stopping the violence here in our community. We'll talk with Richard after the break here on the Big Talker FM.
Keeping Oak Island informed. The Big Talker 106.7 FM WFBT, Carolina Beach.
4. Florida Governor Ron DeSantis, asked about all of the buzz, suggested he is perfectly content running Florida.
That's what it's really all about, just helping folks here. And I hear all this stuff, and honestly, it's nonsense.
Nonsense, and in the governor's words, purely manufactured. DeSantis' remarks energizing supporters of former President Trump. They hope that Mr. Trump will toss his hat into the ring in 24. The new Taliban government of Afghanistan, heavy on hardliners, 4 men who were once held at Guantanamo Bay are in the cabinet. Sirajuddin Haqqani is a new interior minister, and the FBI has a $5 million bounty on his head. Republican Senator Ben Sasse describing him as a bloodthirsty terrorist. Sasse says Haqqani is armed, dangerous, and running a country we just abandoned. Sasse is also taking the Biden administration to task for abandoning Americans who are still trapped behind enemy lines. South Dakota Governor Kristi Noem issuing an executive order aimed at ensuring that abortion drugs are not misused.
Noem's order directs the State Department of Health to create rules for abortion-inducing drugs to only be prescribed or dispensed by a state-licensed physician after an in-person examination. Noem's order was a preemptive move, anticipating the U.S. Food and Drug Administration will allow abortion medications to be dispensed through the mail or virtual pharmacies later this year. According to the South Dakota Department of Health, about 39% of abortions in the state last year were done through medication. I'm Mike Gracia.
In what was the capital of the Confederacy, a landmark for more than 130 years, is coming down today. Crews in Richmond, Virginia, removing the towering statue of General Robert E. Lee astride his trusty horse, Traveler. More on these stories at townhall.com.
Tell me why Relief Factor is so successful in lowering or eliminating pain. I'm often asked that question. Pete and Seth Talbot, the father and son founders of Relief Factor, tell me they believe our bodies were designed to heal. The doctors who formulated Relief Factor selected the 4 best ingredients, 100% drug-free ingredients that each help your body deal with inflammation. Order the 3-week quick start now. Discount it to only $19.95 to see if it will work for you too. Call 800-500-8384. ReliefFactor.com.
Right now, people are home with their pets more often, and I think now, especially with the shedding, they're more cognizant of what's going on and that it's an actual issue, and Dynovite has helped tremendously in our house with that.
I just heard the Dynovite commercial so many times, I said, you know what, I'll give it a shot, and I ordered it and tried it, and it worked.
The Dynovite, the being at home, working with them, they all love it.
Me and Chewy are together 24/7.
Within 3 weeks, he's not scratching and itching, and he's an all-around happier dog.
DINOVITE.com.
A massive fire has raged through an overcrowded prison near Indonesia's capital, killing at least 41 inmates, injuring 80 others.
Televised footage shows firefighters battling to extinguish orange flames while black smoke billows from the compound. Indonesian Red Cross officials evacuated the victims to ambulances, while dozens of bodies in orange bags were laid in a prison room. A police chief has told reporters an early probe into the cause of the fire points to a short circuit in one of 19 cells in one of the prison blocks. After the fire was extinguished, hundreds of police and soldiers were deployed around the prison to prevent prisoners from escaping. I'm Charles de Ledesma.
A powerful earthquake has struck near the Mexican Pacific resort city of Acapulco, killing at least one person, causing buildings to rock and sway in Mexico City, hundreds of miles away. Townhall.com. Senator Rand Paul says new public documents prove that the government's lead infectious disease expert has been somewhat less than forthcoming about the origins of the coronavirus.
Senator Paul says the documents prove Dr. Anthony Fauci, head of the National Institute of Allergy and Infectious Diseases, lied during his previous testimony to Congress. The documents surface in a report by The Intercept showing the U.S. funneled $3.1 million to support coronavirus research at the Wuhan Institute of Virology. $600,000 of that was reportedly used by the Wuhan Institute to find and alter bat coronaviruses that could jump to humans and infect them. Bob Agnew reporting.
Following yesterday's mixed close on Wall Street, this morning stock futures pointing to a lower open later on. Right now, Dow futures are down 35 points. S&P futures off 4. NASDAQ futures 8 points in the red. More on these stories at townhall.com.
The champ is here! The champ is here! The champ is here!
Let me tell you something you already know. The world ain't all sunshine and rainbows. It's a very mean and nasty place, and I don't care how tough you are, it will beat you to your knees and keep you there permanently if you let it. You, me, or nobody is gonna hit as hard as life. But it ain't about how hard you hit. It's about how hard you can get hit and keep moving forward. How much you can take and keep moving forward. That's how winning is done.
When the moon hits your eye like a big pizza pie, that's amore. When the world seems to shine like you've had too much wine, that's amore.
7 minutes past the top of the hour, and once again, you're tuned in to the Big Talker, 106.7 FM. Looks like the dew has faded away on our window pane here this morning, so we are able to see and overlook Battleship, North Carolina, along the banks of the Cape Fear River, connecting you with well, folks, you hear nowhere else, particularly when it comes to the alphabet soup networks or the cable channels that, well, I've tuned into maybe just once or twice over the course of 8.5 months since the beginning of 2021. It was my New Year's resolution to stray away from, well, cable news and some of the mainstream media, and I've done it for all intents and purposes with, of course, just the other day, as I walked into my house after a long day and caught Tucker Carlson and a representative of PETA, well, on the same news channel and also on the same side of the issue regarding the the dogs and the pets out there in Afghanistan that were left behind by this administration that seems hell-bent on distracting us now from what we have seen as a botched withdrawal, and now it's back to, well, COVID, climate change, and, well, red states and their governors impending and infringing on your freedoms and rights, apparently. That's the typical talking points we hear when Democrats are starting to fade when it comes to their popularity on any given issue in our country. Let's turn the table, point the finger, and, well, in fact, blame your political opponents on some of the same things that you're actually trying to implement. And with that said, Richard Battle with us from the freedom-loving state of Texas. And, Richard, I want to give a big congratulations to the Lone Star State after Governor Abbott signed Senate Bill 1 yesterday, a new law to improve and enhance voter confidence and election integrity in the state of Texas. And to no surprise, we're already hearing the cries of voter suppression in places like Texas and elsewhere across the country as election integrity still remains at the forefront of the minds of millions of Americans across the country. Good morning, Richard.
Good morning, Joe. It's great to be with you, and we're grateful for the law, and it's already under legal lawsuits, as we all knew it would be.
And with that said, I'm going to look into it a little further to provide, our listeners the truth and the facts based on this piece of legislation, because they refer back to the typical talking points when we see bills like this move forward and then get signed into law. And it's amazing how quickly the media and those on the political left can jump from one issue to another and somehow, some way, then place all of the blame on Republicans for the world's problems, rather than look in the mirror and say, well, maybe we're making decisions that aren't to the betterment of the Americans that they supposedly represent.
Well, that's exactly true, and that's one of the things that we wanted to talk today about leaders facing the heat. And we all individually and in leadership roles in life have to face the heat or trouble or results from bad decisions or decisions that don't work, and how we stand up to that heat, just like in your opening with winning in life, is so important and differentiates winners and losers.
Well, with that said, when we look at our leaders, I mean, could you imagine a time where we're in the midst of a 20-year conflict and we're beginning to withdraw from the country in which we've been involved with for half of my lifetime, and the person who's making these decisions, as in our commander-in-chief, is unwilling and unwanting to step in front of a microphone and answer any sorts of questions? He makes a statement, turns around, heads back into his home, and then throws out a spokesperson to provide the clarity as to what he just laid out for us without any sort of criticisms or heat. Could you imagine if the previous administration took this approach to the way they handled the business at 1600 Pennsylvania Avenue?
Well, it's amazing that the media allows this to continue, because to me, it makes the president look weaker, because running and hiding from trouble is always the sign of weak leadership, because the best way to face it is to stand fast when it shows up. And by that, I mean, you don't have the deer in the headlight look like you weren't expecting it, which we've seen recently. And then we have to face it head on, and facing it head on shows people and gives people trust in you that you're not afraid of it and you will solve it. And then when you do that confidently and communicate effectively and openly, then that it enhances people's trust in you. And what we're seeing at leadership levels across the country and all kinds of places are people who do not do that. And what I tell people is, when times are good, weak leadership is masked, and they can do the little frivolous things. But when the fur hits the fan, that's when weak leaders are exposed, and we need strong leaders to step in.
Well, it seems as if we've hit the fan on a number of issues, and many that are out of sight, out of mind for the news, and then for the American people as a whole. I mean, you would know this firsthand, living in a border state, down in Texas, and what we've seen there. It catches the news for maybe a cycle or two, and then quickly it's moving on to the next. And we know again how that was handled under the previous administration, and all of the theatrics and drama that some of our elected officials brought to your state during that time. Yet right now, I mean, it's unfathomable to think that over 1 million people have spilled into the country and have been given bus tickets and airplane rides to wherever they want to go in the middle of a health pandemic. I mean, this is so far away from leadership and decisions that, for the betterment of Americans, I don't know how no one and anyone could not see that for what it is. When it comes to how to properly face the heat and the criticisms, talk about what we see as far as traits and characteristics within our leaders that are able to stand the test of time and face the heat and push back against it.
Well, I'll give you an example from World War II. If we remember Winston Churchill stepping in May of 1940, when Britain was on the brink of losing the war to the Nazis, and even people in his own party wanted him to negotiate a peace, but he stood there defiantly, confidently saying that they were going to fight, because he recognized that even if they lost, if they fought, they would get a better deal than if they surrendered. And that's something to me that leaders today need to learn, because they're too easy to surrender and walk away and think that they can avoid any trouble and fight another day on another issue. We see that on the border issue is a great example because it's still going on. It's worse than it ever has been. Today, it's worse than we talked about it months ago. The violence is increasing, but yet every time there's some other issue, people forget about it and it goes off the news cycle and is buried for a while until it's resurrected again. But the problem is still there and will not go away until leadership steps in and solves the issue.
I mean, really, many people, particularly in this country, are reasonable in that if you, and it's rare that you hear a political type actually admit failure or anything when it comes to a negative turn on an issue or a bad decision that you may make when it comes to accountability. It's always divide, distract, and when all else fails, just try and flip the script and turn the table on your political opponent to point the finger without any sort of accountability. I would think that if you're in a leadership position and you're able to, swallow your pride for a moment and lay it out there to the American people, that ultimately you would win over more people rather than, play this game where you're kind of laying in the woods until, the smoke clears.
Well, absolutely, because none of us are perfect. We're all going to make mistakes. And again, you look back at Churchill, and just as he steps into office, you have the catastrophe at Dunkirk, and they have to evacuate 200 to 300,000 soldiers. And they turn that from a major defeat into a major victory because of the way they handled it. And politics was nowhere to be seen. And today the issue is political science and politics are in everything, and that seems to be the prime motivator for every decision. And so it doesn't matter what party someone's in, they have to take the school district, the city council, the state, the nation, whatever it is, and put it first over politics and party.
Yeah, I was going to say, this crosses all political lines here. Republicans just as guilty of this sort of way of life as Democrats. How do we get to this point where, it seemed as if, way back when there was a thought that our political officials, our quote-unquote elected leaders, were about putting service over politics, but it seems as if those words have been flipped for the better part of the last 5 or so decades. Why is that?
Well, power and money are the main things. And as I say, right now, we're at a stage now where we're governed by professional politicians, for professional lobbyists, executed by professional bureaucrats, and protected by professional media. And that to me is a syndicate that until it's broken and changed, we will continue to suffer what we're suffering.
And at the end of the day, we can place blame here, there, and everywhere. Well, isn't it just the blame to be placed on ourselves for remaining outside of the political circle, or at least getting involved in issues and current events? I mean, we've gone a long way from remaining involved, keeping an eye on what our leaders are deciding, while also trying to make a little scratch for ourselves and live our lives the way we please. It seems as if a good portion of our population today, one, has a belief that government is here to take care of us, and two, if you're not on that side of thinking that I'd rather just bury my head in the sand and not get involved, which is almost worse than lining up with people who believe cradle to grave is the way to go.
Well, that's exactly true. And I had a conversation yesterday with a longtime friend who used to be a big-time lobbyist with a telecommunication company. And he identified, and I think it's true, that decades ago, people had a better feel for who they were voting for and why they were voting for them before we had all this information, 24-hour news cycle, the internet, and all this information than people do today. And we need to take that responsibility of our citizenship more seriously, and we need to vet people that are running, not necessarily on what they say, but on who they are and what their principles are, because we've seen principles abandoned wholesale across the board for power. And we need people that are principled. If we know what those principles are, we can vote on them and trust them whether we like them or not. But if people are going to change at every whim, then we never know what we're going to get when we vote for someone.
And I would say that starts at the localist of levels, from your school board to your city council and county commission, and then it follows its way up into Washington, D.C. Real difficult to change the culture in Washington, D.C., but you can do that by getting involved at the local level, and that may be changing the direction and viewpoints of as I said, the school board, which directs maybe your child's district and the schoolhouse in which you send your kid to a good portion of their youth, up to this local level of government. It doesn't take much to keep up to date on these sorts of things, and I see it all the time, whether it be at a stoplight or anywhere else. People glued to their phones. You have to wonder, what they're reading and why they're looking at certain things instead of just spending a little of that extra time, focusing in on issues that have an impact on you, your family, and your future generations that you're going to try and bring up.
Well, precisely. And as you talked about earlier when you were talking about your local school district, trust is the coin of the realm. And trust takes time to build, but it can be forfeited very quickly. And once it's forfeited, it's almost impossible to get trust back. And we see that at the national level now with the COVID vaccine. The messages have been so mixed that there's no trust from either side of the spectrum. And so building trust and getting people to trust you because you're a person of your word and your principles, that's the foundation for effective leadership.
Richard Battle with us here this morning, Navigating Life's Journey, Common Sense in Uncommon Times, one of many publications that he has put out for the world to read and consume. You can find more about his work and why he does it at richardbattle.com. Richard, it's a pleasure, and as always, I look forward to next week's conversation with you.
Joe, my pleasure. Thank you so much, and God bless America.
21 minutes past the hour here on the Big Talker FM. If you'd like to call in, we've got some time before we move from the freedom-loving state of Texas to the socialist state of California. Chef Andrew Gruel is going to join us from the popular seafood restaurant chain that he founded, known as Slapfish. Has one restaurant here on the East Coast, down in the Hilton Head area. Recently opened another franchise in Indianapolis, Indiana. This is based out of Huntington Beach, California. He's been very vocal over the past year and a half in getting restrictions lifted in the state of California and highlighting the many struggling businesses, particularly related to the service industry, him included. He's going to give us a little update as far as what is being said on the ground in regards to this California recall race with Governor Newsom, along with, popular news talk radio host Larry Elder, who you typically hear on this station just after 7 p.m. during the week. Of course, as he runs for governor of California, he's had some fill-in guest hosts. We'll get Chef Gruel's thoughts on the California recall vote. He joins us here in about 15 minutes on the Big Talker FM.
Hello, darkness, my old friend. I've come to talk with you again, because a vision softly creeping left its seeds while I was sleeping, and the vision that was planted in my brain still remains within the sound of silence.
I'm K.O. Davis from K.O.'s Coast to Coast Tree, and I want to be your tree man.
When your trees need cut, 2 letters to know. One is a K, the other is an O. K.O.
Tree man. Proper trimming is the most important thing that you can do, so don't just hire anybody to do it. You need someone that knows what they're doing.
K.O.
Call the professionals at K.O.'s Coast to Coast Tree and visit KOTrees.com.
When your AC stops, don't despair, just go.
Go where? The South Pole?
Go Southern Comfort Heating and Air. For preventive maintenance, service, and repair, go there.
Where?
Southern Comfort Heating and Air.
Are they fair?
Fair and square. Low prices, speedy service, and technicians who care. When your AC stops, don't stare, go there.
Is there a website you can share?
Go SouthernComfort.com. If you go anywhere else, beware.
I swear.
Call 910-524-7609.
Mike check. It's the I. Losowski here, Deputy Director of the Consumer Choice Center. You'll hear me every Friday at 9:30 on the Mornings with Joe Catenacci Show, giving you the latest in consumer news, analysis, and political topics to make sure you get your consumer fix. Then hear me and my radio partner in crime, David Clement, on the Consumer Choice Radio Show, Saturdays at 10. Only here on the Big Talker 106.7 FM.
Folks, we all know ongoing road construction and traffic can weigh heavy on your vehicle. Since 2006, O'Leary's Automotive Repair has provided comprehensive repair services at affordable prices to get you back on the road in no time. Their ASE-certified technicians will help you find a cost-effective repair and maintenance alternatives. O'Leary's has multiple locations in the area in Hampstead, Leland, the Myrtle Grove area, Ogden, and Wrightsboro. O'Leary's Automotive Repair, a trusted, locally owned business since 2006.
Hey everyone, Ben Hawkins here with Cross Country Mortgage. Rates are still at historic lows, and there has never been a better time to purchase your dream home or refinance your existing. With over 300 loan products including conventional, FHA, VA, USDA, renovation, and jumbo, we are certain we have the right loan product for you and your family. Call me today to be pre-qualified to make the offer on your next dream home. 910-352-3373 or visit my website at lendwithben.com.
The Wilmington Cape Fear Home Builders Association serves as the advocate for the building industry, advancing professionalism and promoting community involvement. We are a positive force for responsible growth while protecting property rights and the privilege of home ownership. 3 out of every 5 jobs is touched in some manner by construction in our region. Growth generates jobs, maintains our property values, and builds and updates our infrastructure. Join us Friday mornings for the Construction Connection with the Wilmington Cape Fear Home Builders Association and the Big Talker FM.
Acoustic wave therapy at the Frank Institute is a revolutionary treatment for inflammation, issues of blood flow, and is a solution for the constant suffering of chronic pain. Through the localized transmission of sound waves, stem cells are stimulated to bring about restored blood flow, vascular regeneration, and the disbursement of pain receptors to affected areas. If you've been told that your issues could not be treated without surgery or prescription, give us a call. Non-invasive, non-surgical, and prescription-free. Acoustic wave therapy is only available at the Frank Institute. Call today, 910-679-8534, and ask about acoustic wave therapy.
I am State Farm Agent Rob Renz, and I want to help you get to a better place. Visit us online at ilminsurance.com. That's ilminsurance.com. Like a good neighbor, State Farm is there.
It looks like common sense has prevailed. And a story that I highlighted yesterday locally in regards to New Hanover High School, its football team that had to deal with, of course, the unimaginable events that played out inside the school last Monday, and then being forced to forfeit a game because they couldn't come to an agreement with their opponent at the time as to when the game will be played. The contract stipulated the game be played on a Thursday. Given the events at New Hanover back on Monday, school off Tuesday, one day of practice getting their players emotionally, physically ready to play with just one day of practice wasn't in the cards for their coaching staff. So they said, hey, can we move the game to Friday? New Hanover County could not host the game because they had 3 other home games at the other area high schools. Leesville Road couldn't host the game because they were unable to get the necessary staff in place to host game day activities on their campus. New Hanover petitioned the North Carolina High School Athletic Association. They denied their request to forego this contract and let common sense prevail. Well, it wasn't the high school athletic administration, that association, that changed their minds. It was, in fact, their opponent last week in that Leesville Road High School. And their football team has reversed course, and they will not seek a forfeit against New Hanover over the cancellation of last week's game between the two schools. Of course, the two schools decide this, and the administrative state, again, many criticisms levied their way over the course of the last several months by many within the State General Assembly in Raleigh because, the North Carolina High School Athletic Association unwilling to answer some questions when it came to the oversight of high school athletics, the tens of millions of dollars that they have in their coffers. And good to see the two schools able to sort it out for the benefit of the kids. That's what it's all about, the kids. Yeah, wins and losses are important. The unwillingness for the High School Athletic Association to adapt and adjust, just par for the course when we talk about the administrative state as compared to what many of you and I deal with day to day. Adapt and adjust is commonplace these days. We got a quick COVID update, as I highlighted earlier this morning locally, and some good news. It looks like we may be turning the corner when it comes to hospitalizations at the New Hanover Regional Medical Center and over at Brunswick Medical Center, of course, operated by Novant Health. It looks like the peak of what we saw last week is now on a downward trend, a steep decline, as indicated in a memo that was sent out providing a coastal update from Novant Health this week. At the time, last week, as we hit the peak, we were around 130 patients hospitalized at New Hanover Regional Medical Center. That has dropped to below 90, and that was as of yesterday. Fewer than 90 COVID-related patients at New Hanover Regional Medical Center. Brunswick Medical Center has 15, although Novant Health indicates there's been an uptick in non-COVID-related hospitalizations over in Brunswick County over the past several days. Since being announced to the area, the administering of the monoclonal antibody therapeutic, which Governor DeSantis down in Florida touted months ago to the criticisms of those in the media. And then New York Fauci comes out and says, hey, if you administer this therapeutic in the early stages of a diagnosis, it prevents hospitalizations by 80%. Well, we jump on board just a few weeks ago when it was announced that this was available here locally. Elsewhere around the state, it's been announced and publicized for weeks as well, not here locally. We've got about 450-plus infusions of monoclonal antibody therapeutics that have been administered to COVID-positive people over the past week or so, based on this memo, again, that I received in my inbox a little earlier this morning. Again, you hear none of that news elsewhere across southeastern North Carolina this morning. And again, questions continue to arise stemming from the shooting at New Hanover High School. Our elected officials, well, they're going to throw $350 million to, quote-unquote, stop the violence. No blueprint, no framework. Now they're going to develop a plan to utilize that $350 million. How do they come to that conclusion? Why $350 million? And what will we get out of that? Well, I guess we shall see. City of Wilmington voted last night to extend the Black Lives Matter mural for another year at Gervais Park as you roll into the downtown area on 3rd Street. Yet, when Republicans move forward with historic criminal justice reforms here in the state of North Carolina, the Democrats who spent time yesterday, pushing the mural for another year, failed to mention the fact that there are things being done at the legislative level to address some of the issues that have been highlighted over the past year with burning buildings, looting, rioting, and protests, which is was the purpose of the Black Lives Matter mural in the first place. These sorts of things being addressed at the legislative level by Republicans, yet the Democrats on city council made no mention of that yesterday during their meeting. Reforms in terms of police training, including new mental health and wellness strategies, psychological screenings, an early warning system to track officers based on their use of force throughout their career in law enforcement, all sorts of other accountability measures and transparency proposals put into law, signed by Governor Cooper. Yet, we're back to where we started from a year ago with City Council yesterday pushing forth the vote to extend the mural for another year as you roll into downtown on 3rd Street. As we move to the bottom of the hour, plus a few minutes, we'll speak with Chef Andrew Gruel. He's the founder of the popular seafood restaurant chain known as Slapfish. There's one of his local establishments down on Hilton Head in South Carolina. He's going to give us an update from a boots-on-the-ground perspective in terms of the California recall that is garnering some attention across the nation. We'll talk with Chef Gruel after the break right here on the Big Talker FM.
It's the time of the season when love runs high. In this time, give it to me easy and let me try with pleasured hands to take you in the sun to promised lands, to show you everyone it's the time of the season.
Hello, I'm Jeff Rivenbark with WWAY News. A powerful earthquake has struck in southern Mexico near the Pacific resort city of Acapulco, causing buildings to rock and sway in Mexico City, hundreds of kilometers away. At least one death has been reported. The U.S. Geological Survey says last night's magnitude 7 quake was centered northeast of Acapulco. The mayor says there are no serious problems, though gas leaks and fallen walls were reported. In Virginia today, crews are set to remove one of the country's largest remaining monuments to the Confederacy, a towering statue of Robert E. Lee in Richmond. The bronze likeness of Lee on a horse will be hoisted off its 40-foot pedestal 131 years after it was erected in the former capital of the Confederacy. While many saw the statue as an offensive tribute to the South's slave-holding past, public officials had long resisted its removal. Back here in the Cape Fear, the city of Northwest is exploring options to maintain its police department rather than turning over law enforcement duties to the Brunswick County Sheriff's Office. There was a heartfelt plea from some of the citizens of Northwest after it was revealed city leaders were considering disbanding the police department and contracting with the Brunswick County Sheriff's Office for law enforcement services. The department currently employs a chief and 2 officers, and the chief is set to retire at the end of the month. Some worry outsourcing to the county could create safety concerns. And more than a week after a shooting at New Hanover High School in which a student was injured, the campus announcing a new security policy. The principal sent out an alert Monday requiring clear backpacks at the school. The requirement goes into effect October 11th. A spokesperson for the district says they're also in the process of developing something for all 45 schools in New Hanover County. For more on these stories, head over to WWAYTV3.com. I'm Jeff Rivenbark. Have a great day.
Happy Wednesday, everybody. I'm WWAY meteorologist Ramel Carpenter with your Storm Track 3 forecast. Well, we are going to see another warm and humid day across the Cape Fear. If you're inland of the coast, we're going to see those highs jump into the upper 80s, perhaps the low 90s in a few neighborhoods. And closer to the coast, we're going to be jumping into the middle 80s for afternoon highs. We do have a high in risk for rip currents today, so stay out of the water today if you're headed out to the beach. And as we head into the afternoon hours, we do have a small chance for an afternoon shower or storm, but most places will likely stay quiet. Get your full forecast on WWAY and WWAYTV3.com.
This news and weather is brought to you by 2 Men and a Truck. For your free quote, go to 2menandatruck.com. 2menandatruck.com.
Government has become too big, too overtaxing, and is constantly overregulating every aspect of your life.
If you agree with that, tune in to Consumer Choice Radio every Saturday at 10 a.m. here on the Big Talker 106.7 FM. With me, Yael Osowski.
And me, David Clement. For an hour, you'll get expert analysis on what the government is sinking its teeth into next, and how you, as a consumer, can push back.
ConsumerChoiceRadio.com.
I am State Farm Agent Rob Renz, and I want to help you get to a better place. Visit us online at ilminsurance.com. That's ilminsurance.com. Like a good neighbor, State Farm is there.
Hey, this is Matt Ham, co-founder of Viewprint Faith and Personal Development. Join us for Wake Up Our Faith,
a real conversation about living out your faith between Sundays, streaming live every Wednesday at 11 a.m. on Facebook, YouTube, and Twitter. Catch the replay every Saturday and Sunday at 8 a.m. on Wilmington's Big Talker 106.7 FM. Stop by and visit us on the web at uprint.life.
Folks, we all know ongoing road construction and traffic can weigh heavy on your vehicle. Since 2006, O'Leary's Automotive Repair has provided comprehensive repair services at affordable prices to get you back on the road in no time. Their ASE-certified technicians will help you find a cost-effective repair and maintenance alternatives. O'Leary's has multiple locations in the area in Hampstead, Leland, the Myrtle Grove area, Ogden, and Wrightsboro. O'Leary's Automotive Repair, a trusted, locally owned business since 2006. If you want to jump in, our call-in number is 910-299-7535. Our wires crossed with Chef Gruel, and we're going to get in touch with him here over the next 20 or so minutes because we've got this recall election going on the West Coast. Not that it directly impacts us in any way, shape, or form. 3,000 miles away. I do find it interesting, California, when it comes to Republican governors, they sure do have a way of providing a big splash, whether it be the governor of many moons ago or Caitlyn Jenner or Larry Elder. Now, granted, you have to feel that Gavin Newsom has been feeling the heat for one reason or the other when he goes to Elizabeth Warren and Kamala Harris as his go-to to speak on his behalf, as they have made campaign appearances through the Golden State over the last few days. Governor Gavin Newsom and the great state of California. I wish I still had some friends and family members that live out on the West Coast because, visiting there, particularly parts of Southern California where I frequented multiple occasions from Orange County down to San Diego. Absolutely beautiful. And then as you get up towards Northern California, meaning points north of San Francisco, also, in its own element, extremely beautiful as well. And, they've all left. They have sought greener pastures for one reason or the other, whether it be moving to nearby Nevada or all the way across country to the state of Florida. All of my California friends and family members have left. Well, for the fact of the matter is, they left because they couldn't afford it anymore, moving their businesses with them, along with thousands of others. In fact, California losing a congressional seat with the redistricting and the new census data out. So why not stick with freedom-loving states like the Lone Star State, where we caught up with Richard Battle just a few minutes ago because you're hearing all of the cries related to voter suppression. It's amazing how quickly Democrats and the media can shy away from, the withdrawal in Afghanistan. Now it's climate change and voter suppression. Back to the typical talking points, as you heard yesterday from Joe Biden. Nothing about updating and upgrading outdated infrastructure and utilizing high rates of taxation and money pouring into the coffers to fix some of the issues with parts of New Jersey and New York. None of that talk. It's all weather-related. So they can push, of course, elements of the new Green Deal that will be inside this massive $3.5 trillion budget package that they will unveil over the next several weeks moving into the fall. That was the big talking point yesterday as Grandpa Joe, Clueless Joe, Creepy Joe, Lunch Bucket Joe, Joe keeps forgetting he's president. Joe doesn't know where he wakes up in the morning. Well, yesterday, along with Senator Schumer, who never shies away from a camera, they were in Queens, concrete jungle, talking about how, rising waters and floods created by climate change devastated that area. That's not to say there wasn't devastated flooding. Obviously, the images and videos speak for themselves. Impervious areas, lack of attention to infrastructure for decades, and when they actually do push policies that will actually improve it, gets tied up in all the red tape and all the restrictions and bureaucracy that has led, well, thousands of people to flee many states and cities like New York over the course of the past few decades. I want to give a big congratulations to the Lone Star State of Texas. Governor Abbott signs an election integrity bill yesterday, and again, lawsuits have already been filed, and the cries of voter suppression are here. So let's get to the substance. Instead of using the typical talking points that many use in the political world, let's actually get to the substance of the legislation just to see how and why, some believe this actually suppresses the ability for people to cast a ballot in the Lone Star State. Well, here are some fun little nuggets for you to provide a little perspective because you don't get it anywhere else. The bill adds more hours of early voting. Based on a county's population, the bill will now provide counties with 55,000 people or less with 12 more hours of early voting during weekdays. The threshold used to be 100,000 people. They lowered that threshold amongst counties with populations now with 55,000 instead of 100,000. The bill also adds an extra hour of required voting for other counties. The bill creates uniform and expansive windows for early voting from 6 a.m. until 10 p.m. on weekdays. On Sundays, it's 9 a.m. to 10 p.m. And the bill mandates 6 hours of early voting up from 5. A friendly reminder, the state of Texas offers more early voting than President Joe Biden's home state of Delaware and Senator Chuck Schumer's home state of New York. Friendly reminder, Texas offers more early voting than Delaware or New York. This election integrity bill also brings voter ID to absentee ballots. All voters have to do is write a driver's license or free state ID number or the last 4 digits of their social security number on their ballot. So if you have an absentee ballot, you will need to have one of 3 ways in which to identify yourself through a driver's license number, a free state ID number, or the last 4 digits of your social security number on your ballot in order for it to be counted. And how about this one? Expired licenses can be used too. I've got a funny story about expired licenses, and I'm not sure if I should share it over the air. Should be more or less, I think, maybe I should charge for this story as we get around the table and maybe get a cocktail or two, and then that story may come out as far as my wife and the first time I introduced her to some of my friends in the area and the expired license she had in her possession as we tried to get into a local watering hole and what ensued after that. In fact, even if you are unable to provide a driver's license, a state ID number, or the last 4 of your social security number on your ballot, your absentee ballot, well, it could be an expired license as well. Well, you have a chance to fix that up to and including 6 days after an election. So you forgot to put your state ID number or your last 4 of the social or the driver's license number. Could be an expired license. You forget to do it, or you misprint that number. Well, you've got 6 days after an election to get that fixed for your vote to be counted. Sounds like suppression to me. The bill also bans vote trafficking, quote, for compensation. Now, we know a little bit about that. All you got to do is go out to Bladen County and see how it shook out with the 9th Congressional District race not too long ago. letting paid operatives, and by the way, with that situation in the 9th Congressional District, that kind of business, funny business, had been going on for a long, long time. The man in jail for 6 months now used to be associated with many Democrats in that district. The one-time Republicans sign him up to do these sorts of things. Well, he gets caught, lawsuits are filed, and the guy goes to jail, and we have a recall election. Not to say it was done ethically to begin with, but it's amazing how when the table gets turned and the money's coming from Republicans and not Democrats, how quickly this becomes an issue. Been going on for decades in places like Bladen County. Letting paid operatives collect ballots without supervision. Well, that, of course, exposes voters to intimidation, coercion, disenfranchisement. Banning this is just one more common sense provision. Now, the opponents claim that it throws up all sorts of barriers to the ballot box. Of course, they shy away from providing any sort of specifics. And now you see why. As we just highlighted, some of the bullet points from this legislative proposal that is now law in the state of Texas, the bill just too reasonable and popular to attack on its merits. So those in opposition, well, one, you have to flee the state and create all a circus. We're not going to have a debate and discuss this on its merits and call attention to it, because the media cameras would come if you made that call to highlight all of the voter suppression tactics trying to be enacted by Republicans in Texas. Now we can't do that. Let's just flee the state, go create all this noise in Washington, D.C., get a little news coverage, and throw blanket statements out there without any sort of data or numbers to qualify and quantify anything that you're actually firing out there for the media to take and then spew across the country. So the bill adds more early voting hours. It creates a uniform and expansive window for early voting. Texas offers more early voting than the Democrat states of Delaware or New York. The bill also now adds an element of voter ID to absentee ballots and takes away the ability for, operatives out there who are paid on both the right and left to collect ballots without any sort of supervision. Sounds like voter suppression to me. And here in the state of North Carolina, of course, North Carolinians voted overwhelmingly in 2018 just to implement voter ID at the ballot box. And here it is, the year 2021, and your vote to amend the state constitution has not yet been enacted due to the many lawsuits that we now see being filed in the Lone Star State of Texas. Well, now you have all of the information on your fingertips to provide a counter argument to those who make these ridiculous claims that laying out a clear, concise, and very manageable approach to, our biggest responsibility as citizens doesn't actually stray away and turn people away from the ballot box. In fact, it just provides some uniformity and some measures to make sure that your vote gets counted the way it should. But you won't hear any of these sort of facts in the conversation that you may be hearing, of course, from those in the mainstream media. Our call-in number is 910-299-7535. Again, we've highlighted a lot of local issues today, whether it be, the steep decline we've seen in hospitalizations at New Hanover Regional Medical Center, as reported by New Hanover Regional Medical Center. The fallout from the shooting at New Hanover High School continues. Still, a lot of questions remain unanswered across all fronts. How did we get here? Well, the fact that no one trusts our local school district, rightfully so, after 2 decades of covering up sexual misconduct and criminal behavior among teachers within the district. The school board changes and flips over, in a big way, and there is still little trust amongst those who sit on our local school board. Another reactionary approach. Let's throw some money at it, and then we'll figure out the blueprint and the framework on how to spend that money, as decided by our elected officials in New Hanover County back on Friday. In fact, tomorrow we'll be speaking with one of those elected officials when New Hanover County Board of Commissioner Deb Hayes joins us just after 8 o'clock. We'll take one final timeout for the day, maybe get a call in or two, and we'll wrap up the program. A Wednesday edition of the show concludes right after our final timeout of the morning, right here on the Big Talker FM.
Hey there, it's Charlie Miller, your state representative for Brunswick and New Hanover counties. Thank you for tuning in. Make sure to check out my Facebook page, Representative Charlie Miller, to stay up to date on everything that's happening in the state legislature. You can also sign up for my weekly legislative newsletter to receive a more detailed report on how the voices of District 19 are being heard in Raleigh. If my office can be of any assistance to you, please reach out at 919-733-6753. Paid for by the committee to elect Charlie Miller for NC House.
Is your dog or cat a picky eater or suffer with skin and food allergies or excessive shedding? Did you know dry food was the #1 cause of these health problems?
My name is Victor from Durham, North Carolina. I have a 3-year-old male Cane Corso, and I've been feeding him raw diet for 3 years. I switched over to the ready-made, prepackaged raw diet. He is fit and trim. He still runs around and moves like a puppy.
Let's get your pet naturally healthy, naturally happy today. Visit heavensenthealthypet.com.
Here, Tom Goolsby on the Joe Catenacci Show.
People with common sense know that the entire theory of socialism is one big lie.
The Big Talker 106.7 FM.
Hi, this is Justin Humphreys from the Humphreys Law Firm on Eastwood Road. The Humphreys Law Firm is located in Lumina Station, Wilmington, North Carolina, practices civil litigation, intellectual property, commercial, and residential real estate. Please give us a call at 910-332-0721 or visit us on our website, which is www.humphreysfirm.law. You can also listen to me every Thursday from 6 to 7 p.m. on the Big Talker 106.7 FM.
I'm K.O. Davis from K.O.'s Coast to Coast Tree, and I want to be your tree man.
When your trees need cut, 2 letters to know. One is a K, the other is an O-K-O.
Tree man.
Proper trimming is the most important thing that you can do, so don't just hire anybody to do it. You need someone that knows what they're doing.
K.O.
Call the professionals at K.O.'s Coast to Coast Tree and visit KOTrees.com.
And one other story that we highlighted earlier today was the fact that after nearly a month and a half following the double homicide at his son's house, the founder of True Colors Brewing, George Taylor, has now spoken with multiple media outlets and, in fact, wrote an open letter to our elected officials based on what he saw following the discussion last Friday in terms of violence in our area and the $350 million county commissioners have allocated to, quote-unquote, stop the violence. And George and I actually sat down last week, as I highlighted, and I'm still processing the conversation. I don't know if he changed my mind on his approach to the gang problem going on in our city and across the country. But he did pose a question that I thought was interesting, and that question was, what would you be doing differently as far as working to, quote-unquote, stop the violence? And he sees this mission of True Colors as taking a step forward, and that since the double homicide off of Middle Sound Loop Road, he believes that his business and work, and he says, not that I care, but he sees this as getting criticisms and a bad rap for no reason. He's heard us on this program, has listened to a lot of the criticisms that we've put out there, and he's reached out. So we sat down for about an hour or so, a week ago or week and a half, and I wanted to get his viewpoint, and I'll share some of the things that he said to me. And as I just mentioned, I'm not exactly sold on what they do at True Colors. But see, I'm willing to listen. And like many issues, we don't always necessarily know the ins and outs of everything. And if you may disagree with somebody on the premise of a discussion, doesn't mean you can't learn something. And that doesn't mean you or me or they might not be bringing valid points and arguments to the table. So if we critically think through much of what we do in society, maybe we wouldn't have so much divisiveness and polarization. And that is in due part due to the rise of access to information and social media. Anyone can sit behind a screen and say this, that, or the other. So we did a lot of listening the other day when George came into the office, and I'll pass along almost 2 pages of notes that I took, and maybe you can help us talk through these broader discussions that we're having when it comes to violence in our city and a business that was caught at the center of attention 2 months ago because 2 dead people were shot in an apparent gang murder at the home of George Taylor's son. We'll do that tomorrow. Also in communication with Lieutenant Governor Mark Robinson. He'll be with us on Friday, just after 9 o'clock here on the Big Talker FM. While we head to the latter part of the work week, due to the short week because of the holiday. We'll be back better than ever tomorrow morning. Stay safe, 7 a.m. Be there or be square. We'll talk to you tomorrow.
Keeping Leland informed. The Big Talker 106.7 FM WFBT, Carolina Beach.
President Biden heads to California next week. He will campaign on behalf of embattled Governor Gavin Newsom.
With the governor facing a recall vote next Tuesday and party leaders worried about Democratic turnout, the White House is springing into action. A spokeswoman says the president will pay a visit to California early next week in support of Newsom. Mr. Biden's visit will come after Vice President Harris holds an event with the first-term governor in the San Francisco Bay Area on Wednesday. Greg Clugston, Washington.
Stocks are mixed on Wall Street right now. The Dow is up 59 points, while the Nasdaq is down 51. The S&P up a fraction. More on these stories at townhall.com.
One listener that stands out that I worked with was this older couple that was interested in refinancing. They reached out to a